Welcome back to the Second Look Sports Podcast. Just two of us today. It's Cristian Ceniti alongside Brandon Brown. No Justin, no Mando. These guys are, forget about not in Toronto. They're not even on this freaking continent. They're on the other side of the quote-unquote lake. I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like to be reacting to the sports world, at least here in Toronto, when you're in another continent. I don't know if I'd want to be experiencing it that way. Maybe it's great. Maybe it's less stressful. But Brandon, we've been right here in the core of it. I mean, obviously, from a Toronto Maple Leafs standpoint, a ton has happened in the past 48 hours, let's call it. Obviously, recording this on Wednesdays. So you've had introductory meetings for new GM John Chayka, senior executive advisor Mats Sundin, followed by a draft lottery. And God, if we had recorded this podcast before or during the draft lottery, you'd definitely, I think, be seeing a different mood, at least speaking for myself. But that's not the case. We're doing it after a lot of that is wrapped up. The Raptors were just in the playoffs and, they fell in their 7-game series. Jays are still going on. It's a crazy time in Toronto sports, Brando. How has this week of a whirlwind been for you?
Oh man, Cristian, it's been unbelievable. I think the contrast is the right word. Like there's been such a range of emotions throughout the entire, honestly, just the last 3 or 4 days. Like you mentioned, the Raptors, they kind of flame out of the season with a Game 7 loss. Like it's disappointing. The whole city was behind them. I felt like by the time we got there, people had expectations that changed throughout their 2-week series with Cleveland, and then you get the news kind of just before the game, which was kind of crazy in itself. That the Maple Leafs have made a huge splash. John Chayka, GM, Mats Sundin coming in as a senior advisor. And now, everyone's going crazy because you're right. Like the city it was the last couple of days, it's been absolutely buzzing, for different reasons, culminating in a huge draft lottery last night, in which, the Leafs took the number 1 pick. It's pretty
unbelievably, man. Unbelievably.
And that's the word, right? Like it's just been unbelievable. I feel like the last 3 or 4 days.
We've kind of had a different word, I think, for every day, right? Like Chris Johnston put out his tweet after the press conference, like the one word today is uncomfortable, right? And then we go to unbelievable. What's the next word for the next day? I don't know. I do want to, I was looking, I can't remember where I had found this, but you remember when, I believe it was our boy Jory Nagin-Schechter, who, he does the Bird's Eye View podcast covering the Jays with Zach Warden. We know him through Sportsnet as well. He had put out a great tweet after the Olympics. And it wasn't about the Jays. It was about the Leafs. I don't know if you remember it, but it was essentially, Domi plays too much in the top 6. We're telling McCabe to shoot from the blue line, and the Leafs captain wins gold at the Olympics. The year is 2026. Do you remember that tweet?
I honestly, it's not coming to my mind there, but
I'll go verify it, but So here we go. New Drake album coming out. Raptors lose to the Cavs. Jays are still coming off the high of a playoff run last year, and the Leafs have the number 1 overall pick. The year is not 2016. It is 2026. What is going on, Brando? Time really does repeat itself, but
that's what they say, right? History does tend to repeat itself if you give it enough time, and if you do the same thing, which a lot of the times, in Toronto we can be criticized for kind of doing that, and that's kind of the way it goes. But once in a while, it has to work in your favor. I think it's the first time. Or the second time since, I guess, 2015 that the Leafs have missed the playoffs, and both times they've been rewarded with the number 1 pick through the lottery. So, I mean, got to be feeling good about your luck today if you're a Leafs fan out there. Maybe go pick up a lottery ticket or something. I don't know.
I know my dad played a lottery ticket, and I'm like, hey, before you go, let me just verify. Okay, 7 to 11, 12, fit those in. You're going to need those. Let's start. It's been a roller coaster, especially on the Leafs front of things, as people that are following them very closely. Let's start at the top of the roller coaster with the draft lottery, but we'll definitely get into some of the lows beforehand, where things are going. It's still a rocky ride, and we don't know if we're still going up, going back down. Who knows? But
absolutely,
we have to start with last night, the draft lottery. Like you mentioned, the Toronto Maple Leafs with an 8.5% chance to get the first overall pick in the 2026 draft. They do it. Their numbers come out 7-2, 11-12, and the Toronto Maple Leafs have the rights to the number 1 overall pick. Brando, what was your kind of like feeling going into the day and just your experience going through that moment, watching along?
Well, for me, the day, before the lottery started, it was a lot of back and forth. I mean, I certainly felt optimistic about the Leafs' chances to keep their pick, even in the 5th overall slot, which is kind of what most Leaf fans, I think, were at the very least hoping for. Keep that pick, stay in the top 5, stay in the first round this year. Don't relinquish that pick to Boston, who was just in the playoffs. Like, there was so much emotion around that specific, situation, that I think that's where I was feeling good. Even though they had less than a 50% chance of doing that, I was still
Correct. Yeah.
excited about that opportunity, and I was feeling the energy that they were somehow going to hold on to the pick. Um, but then you battle back and forth with what happens if this happens, what happens if that happens, and but by the time they, Gary and what was his name? Alex DeLuca or something, whatever buddy's name who was operating the machine. Once they got it going, I was feeling pretty good. And then yeah, I don't know how deep you want me to go into this, but it was like a ball by ball
Yep.
situation. I credit to the NHL for their move to this draft lottery situation, because last year I thought it was different. Obviously, the Leafs weren't involved, so it was less kind of, I wasn't worried so much about who was going to pick where and what was going on. It was exciting to see the Islanders, move up the 10 spots and pick Matthew Schaefer, obviously number 1. But I think, when something like that happens, people expect it to zag the other way. And I think a lot of people were thinking, hey, Vancouver, it's going to be, we might end up with chalk. They've got the highest odds. It just feels like that
It's like
kind of year.
27% going into the final ball. The odds were in their
Yeah.
favor going
Yeah.
in and going into the final one. Yeah.
Yeah, and they had their chance throughout the entire first draft. I mean, or lottery, I guess. Like they kept around the top percentage, but it was that third ball when Seattle is all of a sudden
Yeah.
at 18.5%, I believe the number was, to jump up to number 1, which automatically kicks the Leafs out of that top 5 situation and gives Boston their pick. So it wasn't really until that moment where I was very nervous. I was standing the whole time. I think I sat back down and was like, kind of taking it in, like, oh my God, there's a very good chance. The Leafs, I think, we're down to a 4.5% chance themselves. So um, it was insane, because I mean, you see that, and then you get the third ball, and luckily, I think that bounced everything a little bit more equal. The Leafs, I think, were back up to the 9% chance, and then I was feeling good again. I was like, okay, there's more. There was like a 70% chance they were going to keep the pick at that point.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, here we go. Just give me a ball. I think it was like, well, I'm trying to remember now. I think the numbers we didn't want were like 4, 8, and 13, I believe, maybe, or 3.
Yeah. Something. Yes. Yeah.
And I
I
was
think
like,
you got
not
him.
these. 12 would be great, but 4, 8, or 3, whatever the numbers were for Seattle, basically to jump up.
Yeah.
I was like, no, don't, please, no. And then we get the 12, and I think the rest is history. I feel like everyone in Leafs Nation had the same reaction once that ball flew up there, and you could see the 12 so visibly, and it was just like, oh my
It
God, is
was a
this
moment
real
where you
life?
could see it in the tube, like even before
Yeah,
it had got to his hand, right?
yeah,
I think back as well to like we can just do like some of the draft lottery memories, because I really do think when your team is involved in these, it like I'm trying to think like you're talking like a playoff overtime game that gets you kind of on that same edge in terms of the
absolutely.
adrenaline butterflies in your stomach. It is on that level. And so I think back to even before I go back to a decade ago, the Lafreniere draft, the COVID draft in 2020, where no one can attend it, and they also did I think that was another one with the either maybe it wasn't live, maybe what they had done was posted the video after, but I think with that one, because there was flattened odds and everything, and the lottery balls actually had the logos of the teams on them. And if you remember, it was the Leafs ball who had just hit the edge, and it was like so minusculely close to being the pick. We would have had Lafreniere, which maybe right, like who knows what that looks like, but it ends up being the Rangers. And I think this time around, it was the Jets ball that was so close to being that one. Instead, it's the Leafs
Wow.
ball that goes up. So
Which
I thought
also
about
would have
that.
hurt. That would have hurt the Leafs, I believe, as
Yep.
well, right? Yeah. So that's
100%. So
just
I thought about that memory, and then yeah, going back to 2016, it almost felt like it was in the bag. Like I remember that's kind of how my
Definitely a lot
confidence
different, yeah.
was, right? Like I
Yeah.
just kind of was resided to the fact that, yeah, we finished last, we get the pick. Like that's kind of how it's going to go. This is the NFL. That's almost how I felt, even though the year before the McDavid draft, obviously, I remember running Tankathon, almost like manifesting that, like envisioning McDavid in the blue and white beforehand. And God, was that like a letdown. I could run you through my whole day back in 2015 playing some road hockey, going to my friend's house, having dinner. We sit on the couch. He's in the studio. I remember that almost a little too vividly. But yeah, this one's gonna go right to the top. I think. I think I might have honestly sellied that one harder than the Matthews result, which is, it's crazy to think. It was just such
No,
a surprise. Like I didn't consider this result until yesterday. Like it just started to enter my mind, and you let your mind go places. But like you said, I would have sellied 75% as hard for keeping number 5 in Toronto. That would have been fine by me.
no, 1,000%. That was the objective of the night, was just hold on to your
Yeah.
pick. Give yourself some optimism going forward. And like you said, I don't think many people considered the fact that the Leafs could win this draft lottery either. Like it just, for whatever reason, I don't think it settled in until it happened. Really, like I just nobody was clamoring for it. Obviously, people were hopeful and knew it would be a good signal for the organization. And I think compared to 2016, when you hadn't had this kind of taste of success and opportunity and the type of players that the Leafs already have on their team, you start to crave more and more, obviously, every year to reach that goal. And now the way that the league's gone, where these top picks are helping teams almost right out of the box. So I mean, it's one of those things where, yeah, it's such a big opportunity for the Leafs organization, who now is, an hour before you would have looked at them and said, these guys are in shambles. But now, like, it's like there's a clear pathway to at least finding your way back into contending at some point,
Yeah.
and that's just, whatever they deem to be the move they want to make and the decision they decide at number one. But,
There's been
um,
tons of talk about like the Sundin hiring as like PR. It's just good PR. Like he's the
yeah,
human meat shield. This, that. You want to talk about good PR? Like getting the number 1 overall
yeah,
pick is the biggest PR meat shield you could possibly acquire for new management. Like
no,
that has taken
yeah,
so much pressure off. Before we get into more of the number 1 overall side of things, maybe let's spend a little bit of time like the rest of the draft order. San Jose jumps up to number 2 again, second year in a row,
crazy.
third year in a row they won either of the lotteries, right? Like what a stretch. Macklin, Misa, insert your guy here. Is it Stenberg? Is it Chase Reed? Do they trade it? Whatever it is, this is a crazy run of luck for the San Jose Sharks. Shout out to our boy Mando. This was the Mando draft. Uh,
That's so true.
he he
Yeah,
must have. We told him to
double
have, I think,
dipped.
28 drinks over in the UK. I hope he doubled that after
Yeah.
yesterday. He might have been probably in the middle of his sleep, to be honest. But the next 24 hours, sure. Um, but then after San Jose, who moves up to 2 from, I believe it was the ninth best odds.
9
They
or
had a
10.
5%.
It was one of the two. Yeah,
It
I
was a
think you're right.
5% chance, is what it was at
Yeah,
the first overall odds. Is what it
yeah,
ended up as. But they jumped to 2, and then there's the Vancouver part of this, right? And I've said this to a ton of people that when we've been doing kind of the draft lottery talk, not even like just the immediate lead up to this, like throughout the year. And I'll be honest, I'm fond of Vancouver, the city, and the Vancouver Canucks brand. I I always, you guys know, everyone I've talked to knows that I'm brand first. Like that means a lot to me. I love the Canucks jerseys. I love everything about their look. I'm fond of them. There's not a ton of teams above them that I'm happy to see do good. Like I like Vancouver. I wouldn't mind seeing them do good. I think that their passionate fan base is awesome. It obviously has a lot of similarities with ours. I know they hate Toronto a ton. I don't really feel that way towards Vancouver. Like you don't want like a little brother syndrome, because like the Leafs have felt that as well. But anyways, I'm using this to bring me to what I've been talking about kind of throughout this year. Is there's a storyline here with the Canucks where they miss out on 4, not local products, but players who grew up watching the Canucks in 5 drafts. Okay. We talk about the Macklin draft. Oh, sorry. Let's go before that. Connor Bedard. Vancouver product, right? BC guy, they miss out on that. Macklin Celebrini, they miss out on him. Then you have Schaefer, Toronto guy. Gavin McKenna, cousin, very distant cousin of Connor Bedard, although he is a West Coast guy, and I think he has admitted as well to his Canucks upbringing. And then next year is Landon Dupont, who also is in the WHL, is also a BC guy. So right now, they have gone 0 for 3. There is one more chance at sort of the local product. Like BC and just Western Canada has been pumping out first overall picks. And it's kind of entertaining to see. Maybe this is a bit masochistic of me, but they have gone 0 for 3. There's another chance at it next year, but this is a crazy storyline to me. Like, I feel very bad, but
Yeah.
it's just crazy to watch unfold.
No, it is, and like you said, like to have so many years where you can't get a bounce, once or twice, it is kind of crazy. And I think this year especially, it might be the worst one just because of where they're at as an organization as well, and kind of them trying to find their way back after dealing Quinn Hughes and
This was the it's in the bag season, right? This was
100%.
the tank year. This is the I'm not even thinking about it. We're gonna finally get our pick.
And it made sense. And I think myself, I talked about it earlier, like I was expecting them to, if not win the first overall pick, I was like, okay, then they'll win the lottery in the second one. They'll get the second one, and that might still give them an opportunity at McKenna. At the very least, maybe they get an opportunity at a kid like Stenberg. So it's like, hey, you in a draft like this, I think they would have probably felt fine about their prospects at that point. But yeah, to see them drop to number 3 now, and like then there's questions about, are the defensemen the next best guys if the two teams ahead of them select the forwards, and I'm not sure that that's what the Canucks are looking for right now. Like there's a lot of I'm sure negative feelings when it comes to this. And I think if it wasn't Toronto at number 1 and it was another Eastern Conference team, or if the Sharks had won the number 1 pick again, folks in Vancouver might not have felt so close to it because it's Toronto. But I'm with you. Like I root for Vancouver. I want them to do as good as possible. Um, for me, they're like, obviously all the Canadian teams are, have their own history and legacy, but Vancouver, you're right, sticks out in a different way, not necessarily a more favorable way. Obviously the Oilers have a history, the Canadians have a history, but the Canucks and Flames, they're more kind of, yeah, like they've had to fight for it in a way that I think
Yeah.
Leafs fans understand too, because it's been so long since the Leafs have had success. So, yeah, like it's just one of those unfortunate things that hopefully, like you said, whether it's next year or down the road, they get one of those balls to go their way, and maybe they'll get another franchise player that they unfortunately like that they had to lose this season. So it's too bad for the
Yeah.
Canucks, but you never know.
No, you don't ever know. And rounding out the top 5, it's Chicago will be picking 4 and the Rangers at 5. So you got 3 original 6 teams in the top 5. I think that's the NHL must like that a decent bit. Obviously means these
Yeah.
teams had not great seasons, but you like to see them rewarded, I
I think
guess.
the Blackhawks, I think you're happy just to be there in that top 5 group again, like just to
Yeah.
continue to bring in great players, and they'll have their pick at a number of guys I'm sure that they'll be looking at. The Rangers, I mean, you might feel a little bit, worse about yourself if you're a Rangers fan, just because they've been in such disarray. And like, I think winning the lottery would have been a huge thing for them, and even sticking at um, at 4, I guess it would have been a great spot for them. But to move back as well twice, it's like, yeah, like it just kind of changes how you look at their season, and what really they're going to be trying to do going forward. So
I would say even like on the flip side, the Rangers have kind of been maybe not the San Jose. I'm trying to think of another example, but they were gifted twice. I think it was twice in a row, like Lafreniere
that's fair.
and
Yeah.
Capo Caco.
Yeah.
They weren't able to develop either guy really to their full potential. Well, we don't know how much really is to blame on the Rangers or just maybe the drafts themselves were weaker. We don't really know, but I think they're a cautionary tale for teams like Toronto who win the lottery. Like you kind of have to turn the player into someone as well. It's not a given that they are who they are before their draft. Like Lafreniere's comps, mainly because he also played for Rimouski. Like there was Crosby talk. Like there was a ton of hype for him. So it is a cautionary tale though, and maybe if you're the Rangers, it's like, hey, we've seen the lucky side of the coin, and it turned out to be unlucky. Maybe we can't cry over spilled milk. You're still getting a really good player, and maybe the lack of pressure of having won the lottery helps in some way. But yeah, I think just before we also talk some more number one overall pick, just what this does for Toronto in the next 2 years. There was a ton of noise before the lottery. Kevin Kurz, Philadelphia Flyers beat writer, he went on Twitter and he talked about how his sources in the Flyers organization were under the belief that if Toronto kept their pick, which obviously ended up happening, the 2027 first round pick from Toronto, which was in this is relating to the Scott Laughton trade last year, it'd be Philly's pick unprotected, meaning Boston and that other Toronto first from the Carlo deal in 2028, that's theirs. I think even today, though, we've actually had some more, like Elliot Friedman today on 32 Thoughts. I don't know if maybe he wasn't caught up in it either, but he was reporting kind of what we had heard earlier, where the pick next year is still top 10 protected. I think it's what Kurz was reporting. Like, we're going to have to wait for more clarity. I think that it's 2 unprotected first round picks from the Toronto Maple Leafs going forward, but we'll wait to see what happens there. And none of it is quote unquote good for the Leafs' future in that sense. I don't know if you had anything from there, but there's been conflicting stuff with that.
No, but I would just say that I think most people are operating under that assumption, which I think is, which means if anything were to change, it would be on the positive side, like of a potential protection or something. But yeah, I think just understanding that most people, and I would include myself in this, is like, I think you take the number one the number one pick this year, knowing that you will lose an opportunity in the lottery the next couple of years. Because there's how many signals are there that the team is going to be pushing to try to get back in the playoffs, which at the very least, even if you're not in the playoffs, they're going to likely or hopefully be somewhere around it where, you might have a decreased percentage to win the lottery than even this year where they were at 8.5%.
Yeah. The reality is too, like getting first overall, that player will help you try and aim for the playoffs next year more than the 5th overall pick would,
100%.
right? Like you could have this kind of alternate angle if the Leafs ended up staying at 5 and you're saying, well, I don't know, I'm not totally bought on this team, the vision, they could be worse next year and we might not have it, right? Like that, this is a different scenario. You have to feel confident that that number one pick can help you. You have anything to add before we talk some McKenna Stenberg here one day after the lottery?
No, I mean, I would just say that it's very fortuitous that this all happened. Like I think it's an unbelievable opportunity for the Leafs, and hopefully things go their way and they make the right decision. I don't think there's too much. We're going to get into it. Like there's not too much they can do too wrong if they just kind of do what I assume their scouting department's already doing, and so it should be just make for a very interesting off season. I think now.
I think like this is. I think how you laid it out in terms of they can't really do anything wrong. I think that's closer to the truth than maybe some people think. Like I think 24 hours or less than 24 hours removed from the draft lottery, like there is a there's a non-0% chance that it isn't just clear-cut number one. You walk up and take McKenna. I think that's where I'm leaning right now. That is what I would do. I think that's what the majority of people would do right now. But like I'm someone who definitely puts a lot of stock into the opinion of a guy like Jason Bukala, who right after the draft lottery, Bieksa asked him, like, if you're advising the Toronto Maple Leafs today, who are you picking? And Book said, Ivor Stenberg, right? Yeah. And, just comparing the two guys stylistically, Gavin McKenna's 5'11". He's a little slighter frame. Obviously, these guys are going to grow. They're going to put on meat a ton, but this is just kind of the base levels with these guys. His comps are Kane, Kucherov. Those are like incredibly enticing. Ivor Stenberg, we've heard winger Barkov. I think Bukala said Sebastian Aho. So, I mean, those are two different types of players, but I mean, great all around either way. I don't think it's totally clear cut. Fuda as well today on Fan Hockey's show also said he talked to two directors of amateur scouting and got two different results. One said McKenna at one, the other said Stenberg. Is this going to be a totally manufactured conversation? I don't think so. And I think you can even have the slightest conversation about the moving down and trying to select a defenseman And people might roll their eyes at that. I mean, it all comes down to what you could get in a trade, right? Like you're
Yeah.
not looking to limit your options in that sense. Like I said, I was up until 2 a.m. watching Stenberg highlights and interviews, McKenna highlights and interviews. Like, I'm already in the weeds here. I would lean McKenna. I think that's kind of where I think it will end up. But I don't know if it's just going to be a straight path. I don't think these guys are decided today, and I don't think they should be. I think that they have to have the approach of turn every rock over, talk to every scout in the scouting department with Mark Leach at the head of it, and like really deliberate over this decision.
Yeah, no, and I have no doubt that they will. But you're right. Like the interesting thing is that now with there being such a departure, it feels like a people, some being a McKenna in the McKenna group, some being more leaning Stenberg. It really just comes down to what the group with the Leafs and Mark Leach, which way they're. I assume they've had their own set of rankings that they've got their own opinion on which guy they would potentially take at number one. You would have thought that they'd be doing some extensive work on that, knowing that you have a 10% or near 10% chance of this situation happening. It's not like they just up and traded for the pick today and nobody was really, aware of it. So yeah, it all really comes down to what their feelings are about the two players because you look at the two guys that are coming in. Sundin is obviously going to have, I would imagine, his own bias just because, you
He's
know,
explicitly said in multiple interviews that he's talked about what he's bringing to the organization. He said he wants to represent earlier eras of the Leafs, the
yeah,
positives and negatives from those times, and that he thinks he has value to bring in terms of having watched the Leafs very closely in the past decade. And having watched, he said he's been involved with the Swedish national team. He's done a little bit of the TV work at the Olympics, and he has mentioned explicitly prospects, which leads
yeah.
to like the Stenberg connection. He has to have obviously more than an awareness. I think he probably has watched him semi closely this year, right?
Oh, I would. There's no doubt in my mind. Like I'm sure, very aware of him and his skill set and what he's able to do. Maybe less so of Gavin McKenna for sure, but I would
Yeah,
say that's where the importance is. Because, and I also don't know how much Chayka, I should say, is really going to be in terms of. I know he's going to have his opinion too, however that goes, but I think he will lean on the other opinions to kind of help decide what this is going to look like. And if the scouting department has Stenberg up there and Sundin feels that way, I don't think there's not going to be another voice in there saying go for McKenna, go for the. So I think, like I said, it just if it's the scouting group is saying, hey, McKenna's our kind of consensus guy, and then Sundin's like, yeah, well, and there's kind of a battling. Then it's like, okay, what how do we make this decision?
yeah,
But I still think they would lean with what the group that's been there, the scouting team, like. So
sure.
to me, it just all comes down to that. And for me,
You're right
I
that the legwork should already be done. Like this is kind of
yeah,
putting the icing on the cake. Like obviously there's been a ton of homework done by the scouts who this is the thing with every organizational kind of turnover. The
yeah,
scouting departments are kind of the last that maybe get evaluated in that sense because you have to go through the draft, let these guys do their work that they've been doing all year. It's very rare to see changes a month before the draft. So
yeah, and
we
there
don't know if
I'm
these
sure.
guys are here for the long haul, but yeah,
Well, and because of
that's where the
that,
work has
I
been
think
done.
they're typically leaned on heavily in these situations too, because they've been there for so long, and to try to get a new, a new voice or get new opinions in, it would be too difficult to do this close to it. But um, yeah, I think I'm with you. I think they do make what I think is the easier decision in terms of the long term view and go up there and just take McKenna. I think if Stenberg goes and has an unbelievable world championships, it might make things a little bit more difficult.
And
We know McKenna's
McKenna
not going to be
doesn't.
there.
I
Yeah.
This is the thing where before we recorded, I said, you know what? Let me just shut up and we'll talk about this on the pod. Like I went to the bed saying, "Wow, this is last night." It's funny. The
Yeah.
night before, like going like Monday night into Tuesday night, I was also sleepless for very different reasons, right?
I was
It's
honestly
like,
so excited to just watch the lottery, and then it was like not until it happened that I was like, "Oh my god, this is better than
yeah,
I could have
I,
even
I was
imagined." Like,
sleepless just coming
yeah,
off of the press conferences, and we'll talk about that. Just kind of being like, God, what is ahead of us here?
yeah,
And then yesterday I was sleepless because just total excitement. I was talking with you, but before the draft lottery, we were texting, and I was just like, going through one podcast and another podcast and another podcast,
Yeah,
listening to basically everyone's takes coming out of those pressers. And God, was that a different mood than listening to everything post draft lottery, people's reactions, listening to some stuff this morning. Where was I going with this? Okay, I will say this. Um, I think there's also like a chance that Sundin could have his bias, but it goes in the opposite direction in terms of like, I've seen a lot of Stenberg. He's fine. Like that's possible too. Just because we're saying Sundin has a
for
bias in
sure.
terms of he's probably seen a lot of Stenberg, we're not
Yeah.
implying. Who knows? Maybe he's got a bias positively or negatively with Stenberg. Just because he's a Swede doesn't really mean he's going to be like, no, that's my guy no matter what. So
Well,
just
and
being
there,
fair in that aspect.
you brought up Bukala, like, he has other Swedes high in this draft, like, like, he might just be like, "I like this Bork guy more anyway," like, you never
Yeah,
know, so,
yeah,
like, you're right, like, there could be a range of ways, and even
yeah,
Sundin himself might have that bias and just say, "I'm not making this decision." I mean, we've seen how he's reacted the last couple of days, and he doesn't seem like the guy to me, unless he's, maybe different behind closed doors, which fine, but he doesn't seem like he's gonna be sticking himself into the draft room and being like, "Hey, guys, we gotta go after Stenberg, like,
yeah,
this is why," like, he might, if they ask for his opinion, he might give it, but I don't
yeah.
think he's going to be, hard in there.
Overriding some other,
Yeah,
yeah,
like
we'll get
trying
we'll get
very
more
hard
into
to
that
push
because
him
like
down.
I definitely
Yeah,
got that impression too from when we saw him. This is what I was going to say. You brought up the fact
there
that
we go.
Stenberg is going to the World Championships and Gavin McKenna
Yes,
isn't.
yes, that's right.
That came out at midnight from Sportsnet that this was confirmed because he originally was planning to go.
That's what was weird about it. I thought I had read
What
at
the
some point
hell?
that he was, like, on the cusp, and to me, I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, he's gonna go then." It made
I'm
no
like, this
sense
is
not
great.
to.
I get to watch, like, we all get to watch these guys both there. Cause I was honest, like I said, I went to bed last night, finally at like 2 a.m., saying to myself, this is awesome. We get to watch these two. This draft race is not over. I would have told you that those two both playing at the World Championships, that mattered. That mattered. Seeing what their performances were. I remember watching Matthews and Laine at the World Championships, and I think they both performed well. I think in that scenario, it honestly didn't kind of sway the opinion more towards Matthews. It felt like Matthews still in the first place. I,
Yeah.
I would say right now that there's an opportunity for Stenberg to have a really good showing and McKenna not being able to respond. That's something. There's something to that.
No, 100%. And we know, like, especially in 2026, there's a huge recency bias, and everyone wants to see what they're doing up to the moment. And it's just like, yeah, like, you're 100% right. Like, I don't think that's out of the question in terms of having some impact and making a decision maybe more difficult. But like we've been talking about, like, it all just depends on where the Leafs are with these two guys, and kind of where they're leaning. And I'm sure they'll go with what they think is the best decision. I think obviously we're all Canadian. We kind of always going to root for the Canadian kids. So I think it'd be an amazing moment to see, the Leafs go up there and pick McKenna in Buffalo, right there across the border. I'm sure there'll be a ton of Canadian fans there. Obviously, a ton of Leafs fans are going to go down there now if they can. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very reminiscent of that moment with Matthews, I feel like, for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the case. We'll tie up like the loose ends here that just in terms of what I've learned so far about McKenna and Stenberg. Like I said, very early into the process of it, like there is going to be 2 months worth of debate, I think, on this. Like I said, I think, and we'll talk about this as well, kind of what our opinions were going into the Sundin and Chayka hirings before hearing from them and before kind of going through everyone's due diligence, which has been big buzzwords here. My standing point is McKenna, but I've like what I've learned. The Bukala opinion was interesting to me. I go and watch highlights, right? And you have to be careful just watching the mixtapes. We went through mixtape Michelli, and I'm someone who's still maybe positive on Michelli, but listen, that wasn't maybe represented like totally representative of reality.
Yeah.
So listen, you have to be careful. You're only seeing offensive highlights. You're not really getting highlight packs of a guy in the defensive end making really smart plays in his positioning. Like those are Books has
Well,
those in his,
yeah,
in
that's
his
what I was
pro
going to
hockey
say.
group, right? That's where
Yeah.
those are.
That's
They're
part of
not
his
on these
decision
two.
making, it seems like.
Um,
The
yeah,
one
I,
question
I
I would
would
have
just
for
say,
you,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
what do you make? I feel like this is going to be a huge part of the conversation, but like, what do you make of the different league? I guess I'll use the word leagues. I don't, that doesn't maybe fit for McKenna, but like where these guys are playing and how that affects how the teams will look at them, as they're kind of pitted against each other. Cause I know Bukala has been big on, like, obviously McKenna had a great second half at Penn State, but you know, um, Stenberg's been playing, I think it's for I want to say
For
for
Lunda, yep.
Lunda.
Yeah.
So he's been playing pro hockey. We saw that with Matthews. Like, I don't think that had a huge effect on his draft stock because I think he was already seen as kind of the consensus number one before he joined. What was he? Was it
Zurich.
Switzerland? Zurich. That's right.
Yeah.
So,
The
um,
Lions.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I think that maybe will have a bigger impact on the conversation between these two players, especially the way McKenna
I think that
started.
shows
But
through
I,
from watching them. Like I think
yeah,
it's a noticeable difference visibly. Like this was just from the eye test of watching the highlights. You watch some of these plays where Stenberg and McKenna are picking up points, and Stenberg, a lot of the plays look closer to the NHL. A lot of the plays are interior, where it's whether it's him from behind the net, finding his way in front, throwing a backhand on and scoring, or a pass to the far side post, things that are a lot closer to the net. Whereas the Gavin McKenna highlights, like it is a lot of power play, it is a lot of perimeter. It just
yeah,
is, and that's a symptom of the league that they are playing in. Like definitely, like this is part of why I bring it up. Like if you're the Leafs, we know that they are not leaning, they're retooling. Right, that is the plan here. They are trying to compete as soon as next year, and so definitely like the more NHL finished product, I think, is Ivor Stenberg. That being said, McKenna's speed is not speed. His skill is incredible. And just some of the stats that you read out, like they almost feel like undeniable. Stenberg has great stats too. Like he is up there as far as underage Swedes and their performances, like over a season by points per game. He's high up there.
yeah.
McKenna, and I would encourage people to read. I was reading an article on the Athletic from Harman Dial. This came out yesterday. Um, I've got it somewhere here. I'm gonna find it. But anyways, basically he had point per games played by players in the CHL in their D-1 year, so the year before they're drafted. It is Gavin McKenna by like basically a mile, I would call it. I believe he was 2.3 points per game. And sorry, so you know what? This wasn't the year before the draft. This is 2 years. This is
Right.
D-1.
Because obviously, yeah, he was playing
Yeah, so
last
this is
year.
him with the Medicine Hat Tigers, 2.3 points per game. I believe second is John Tavares at 2 points per game. So in the salary cap era, it is him by a mile. And the point is made that, his comp is Patrick Kane. Okay. And let's even look at like Connor Bedard, who had the chance in his draft year to like be back in the WHL with Regina, torch the league. Right? Gavin McKenna kind of took that out of his own hands. Had he stayed in Medicine Hat, you don't think he's putting up like 150 points? And then
I'm
we're
so
actually saying
glad
that
that,
he has less blemishes,
yeah.
right? So
Well, I'm
like he
so
took
glad
on
that
the
you brought that
challenge.
up. Yeah, like I'm so glad you brought that up because that was where I was going. Is like,
Yeah.
do you think this would be a more or less of a conversation if McKenna had stayed in the W and played his final year out in Medicine Hat and put up another better season if he was able to do that? Like the conversation would shift, especially I think, especially towards just the way the game is going and like the way that we look. I think at some of these young kids coming in, and if the more special things they can do, I think it now we can kind of see that happening sooner in the NHL as opposed to
Yes.
obviously being NHL ready is like the most important thing when it comes to drafting these kids. But I think we can see
See,
more
it's
of
the
a
most important
potential.
thing I'd say for like the
Yeah,
Leafs this year because we're looking to contend. But like
yeah,
if it's like a Chicago, you don't really care if the guy's NHL ready next year, right? Like this is why I think that
yeah.
this makes it more
Well,
of the conversation.
yeah, it is team by team, but like I think it's true. Like you hope that the Leafs have they obviously are all in on trying to get back into the playoffs next year, but you got to think with the situation with Matthews, they might have one small eye on the future, and if they can say,
Yeah.
and especially with these two kids, where it's like even if Stenberg is more NHL ready to help us this season, McKenna's not crazy far behind, and if he takes a bigger jump in the next couple of years, that helps us more maybe than picking the kid who might be able to help us now. But you're right, like if they have it all depends again, like where they're looking. If they're asking Mark Leach for that specific, opinion on which kid is going to help us faster, maybe that answer is Stenberg, and then maybe that's where they lean. But
I would
we
also point to again the Rangers example of a Lafreniere. Like, there's a like I'm trying to think of actually who was in that draft. Like, I'm sure there was someone who obviously were saying, "Duh, you should have took him." But that Quinton Byfield goes second overall to the Kings. I think Lucas Raymond is in that draft. Um, like I I think where I'm trying to go with that is like the Rangers. If you do a bad job with development, then those guys might not be able to help you in the future or in the now. And yeah, so with McKenna, I feel like McKenna, for example, what is he stepping into that's going to help him really develop? Because I think we can question whether this is a great situation. Like, we don't know what's up with Berube. We've obviously talked a lot about, like, Toronto in general has talked a lot about Matthews, Nylander, their culture. Like, is Gavin McKenna stepping into a great culture where he's going to develop into a well-rounded player versus Ivor Stenberg, might already kind of be well-rounded in the sense he doesn't need as much of the NHL finishing touch on him. He's going to kind of naturally grow into a guy who's on your penalty kill. He's a do-it-all. Once again, the comps are like Sebastian Aho or Winger Barkov. Those are fantastic comps, and you kind of feel like you could plop that guy onto any team, and it's going to be a great fit. McKenna, I feel like, takes a bit more finesse in how you develop him. You could end up with a player who still has bad habits at the NHL level, and this has less to do with him, the player. It's the situation. If you had
Yeah.
Gavin McKenna on, let's say, the Bruins, for example, right? Like, I talk a ton about their culture and what it is. I think you have more faith that he rounds out his defensive game. In Toronto, I question whether him coming under the influence of Matthews and Nylander, how do you end up with well-rounded Gavin McKenna who takes huge steps at the defensive level and really reaches his ceiling? Is that fair to
Yeah.
question?
Oh, it absolutely is, and you gotta admit, like, you use the Boston Bruins as an example, you probably trust them right now to do, to do good by the player and allow him to develop the way that he needs to, compared to the desperation that the Leafs are in right now, where, yeah, they take a kid first overall. Is there any doubt in anyone's mind that their hope is that they can staple them to Auston Matthews' wing and that they can say, "Hey, we've got our first line winger now, like, let's get going on the rest of our group." Like, no, other teams, if and it's funny, like, I don't know, maybe this was a conversation at some other point, but I think Bukala talked about it, if not last night, he might have this morning on JD's show, that McKenna might not be like, "Hey, step right into the NHL day one, and here you're ready to go." They might be maybe more of like a see how it goes along the first year kind of thing. I don't know if that's a conversation on many other teams outside of the Leafs. Like, you're 100% right
Yeah.
about like the culture of trying to bring a kid and that fear of maybe getting it wrong and putting him in a position to fail. Like, I don't know
Can I give you another
necessarily.
comp here as well? Like, for like that scenario
Please,
there, right there that you lined
yeah,
out, that sounds like Jack Hughes. Right? Think about the New Jersey
yeah,
Devils before like, they win that lottery. At that point, they already had Nico Hischier. They had signed like, at the time, it was a big free agent signing, getting Kevin Shattenkirk on their blue line. I think that was pre-Dougie Hamilton, but they had made moves to kind of be the next up and up team. Like, at that point, the
yeah,
expectations when they drafted Nico Hischier first overall, huge expectations for next year. They disappoint, get Jack Hughes, and, he's stepping into a team that's kind of already, quote unquote, ready to take the jump. PK Subban, I think, is on that team, right? Like,
right,
that's a team with tons of expectations. They fall flat. He falls flat. Like, he takes multiple years to reach the level that he's at right now, right?
yeah,
Like, I think
yeah.
that is a very potential path for Gavin McKenna here, where he comes in, has a okay first season. Maybe it's, 40 points, 50 points, tough on the defensive end. The Leafs struggle defensively. Like, that seems totally within the realm of possibility.
Yeah. No, and that's where it comes into the point, like, and I mean, I'll give this, where I'll give Craig Berube some credit, like, assuming that he's the coach next year, I don't think they can really put a mandate on him to play anybody in a specific spot or a specific amount of time. Like, we saw that last year where, Easton Cowan was available to him and it was likely, nudged along that he should be playing. And then, but Berube, at times chose not to do that. And,
There was
obviously
ups and
later
downs.
in
He
the
was
year,
sent down at one point.
that's right, and I think they understood kind of his development and what maybe was needed, and we saw him kind of flourish more at the end of the season when he had more opportunity, and I think we expect that to continue. But in a situation like this, if they get desperate enough to try to yeah, dictate based on what the team needs compared to what the player needs, it's definitely an opportunity to A, stunt a player's growth, but also B, yeah, put yourself in a position where
Yeah.
you're still guessing kind of what, the next step looks like. So I think it is most important, like you said, that not only they pick the player that they think best fits what they're trying to do going forward, but that they pick the player that they believe they can develop, at their own speed.
Yeah. Apologies if you can hear my dog in the background. He's really excited about Gavin
No
McKenna versus
worries.
Ivor Stenberg as well. Stenberg. I'm going to just wrap on some other McKenna stats here. Once again, this Harman Dial article from yesterday on The Athletic is 10 out of 10. As I mentioned, points per game for CHL players in their D-1 season. McKenna, 2.3. Tavares, 2. Third is McDavid at 1.74. And fourth is Connor Bedard at 1.61. So like that is a huge number. And you think back to the hype about McKenna coming into this year, and that
Yeah.
more
Two
that
2 years
represents
ago,
where it was at. Yeah.
2 years ago, it was like, hey, this McKenna kid, just wait for that draft. Like he's gonna be the net.
Hey,
Like
he might be
and then
better than Connor Bedard already. Like that was some of the talk a year before, right? So
yeah,
here's
it's
another
insane.
one here where most NCAA points per game by a draft eligible forward. The best, Adam Fantilli, 1.81. Jack Eichel, 1.78. Macklin Celebrini, 1.68. Fourth is Gavin McKenna at 1.46. And just rounded out of 5 is Phil Kessel at 1.31. So
Let's
those 4
go.
guys, though, those are all very relevant and recent picks. What is the context there as well? Think about the teams that those guys are playing on, right? Like
Or
Celebrini's BU team.
a better
These
team,
are
I
these are
imagine.
some of the players on Celebrini's team in 2023 at BU. Tom Willander, first round pick with the Canucks. He's now in the NHL. Lane Hudson, you know who that is. Ryan Green, he's now an NHL player with the Chicago Blackhawks. He's played some time with Bedard. He's one of their young guys there. Jack Hughes, no, not that Jack Hughes. I don't know where he's at in the Kings system. Luke Tuck, a guy. Dylan Peterson, not familiar with. Gavin McCarthy, no. So some of these guys, not as much. But there's like the core guys there are plentiful. Here is Gavin McKenna's help this year.
Oh no.
Jackson Smith, first round pick of CBJ last year. Charlie
Cool.
Chirado, a second round pick of Carolina last year. Reese Laubach, a 7th rounder from 2022 in San Jose. And Luke Misa, 4th round pick of Calgary 2 years ago. That is the end of the list. 4
Wow.
NHL drafted prospects with Gavin McKenna. Once again, you can take the perspective of, well, he's got all this, he's the guy, he's the big dog in the small pond. He should be racking up even more points. Like, he doesn't have to fight for ice time. There's no one else for him to answer to. Or you can have the perspective of, God, this guy, like college, there's a lot of super lines. Like I think back to Nyes, Cooley, and Snuggerud, right? With the Gophers. And it's just McKenna and guys. Like that's going to maybe also bring down your production. So
Yeah.
there's a
No, and
ton to consider.
100%, and that's why I like the conversation about the WHL and the CHL compared to the NCAA route is still very relevant because I think as more players continue to go that way, it's still relatively unknown how the comparison should be made,
Yeah.
I would say,
My
between,
guess would
draft
be that
eligible
that
players.
college becomes like close. I think it will look closer to NHL hockey over time, just by way of like increasing the competition, right? If you have
Yeah,
more of the
yeah,
best prospects in the world,
yeah.
feeding into the college system, I think it'll look less like the CHL. I think we might see the CHL trend even younger, right? And then you have more of these guys who are trying to basically get their jump into the NHL that are in college. I think that's what it'll end up looking like.
Right, yeah.
Um,
No, it's
yeah, and
definitely
just
interesting. Yeah.
the last stat here I will throw in is Gavin McKenna in 180 hockey games since the 22-23 season. This is across the WHL, the World Juniors, and NCAA. In 180 hockey games, he has 99 goals, 211 assists for 310 points in 180 games in the past 2 or 3 years here. That is a lot. That is a lot. So
It's a
once
ton.
again, I think we've talked about this here enough. Like we've made the perspective kind of 24 hours in. Like there is a lot to consider in favor of Stenberg and in favor of McKenna. Like I really think this is as clear as not okay. I shouldn't say as clear as mud because once again, I think we are leaning McKenna because the offensive talent feels undeniable. And when you're being compared to guys like Kane and Kucherov, you kind of do just brush aside the defensive weakness or question marks there because you, like I said, I think if he's in an organization that can develop him defensively, he's the easy, very easy pick. We have question marks with the Leafs and how they're going to develop here. All right. And we have recent examples of guys like with the Rangers not maybe being developed the best. So
Yeah.
anything else on the number one pick, draft lottery, anything on that front?
No, I mean, I think we went through a lot of it. And it's going to continue as we get closer to the draft. We're not even close at this point
No, no.
to kind of being near the end, and I'm sure we're going to hear tons of reports and speculation about what the team's going to do. And I'm just excited to see where it all ends up because like I said, you can't really you could down the line you can make a wrong decision, but on draft
Yeah,
night we're just going to be excited for the selection they
I
make.
agree. I agree. Okay, let's go back in time a little bit. We're gonna
Yeah.
go now and talk about Chayka and Sundin, who, they had a ton of availabilities on Monday. They obviously had the real sports availability with Pelly, Sundin, Chayka. They had an appearance in studio on Real Kipper and Born, which I think they were in for about 35-ish minutes, let's say. Elliot had to sit down with Chayka and Sundin individually. There's a lot to go through. I do think honestly for the most part you get all the answers you want from um the introductory presser, the original presser on Monday. But before we get into that, what is kind of your feeling going into the press conference before we get into what's actually being said? So we hear on Sunday the official announcement. So in that period from Sunday afternoon to Monday morning, what are you kind of expecting going into this?
Well, I was kind of just expecting honestly, I was expecting more just like an introduction. I expected it to be pretty, I mean, it wasn't like super long, but I expected it to be rather brief. I didn't really expect them to get into too much. I definitely expected, um, Chayka to address what he's been doing, what he's done, um, his vision. I expected like these things to be happening, but I did expect it to be just kind of them laying things out, and I didn't expect much resolution in terms of answers for questions that we might have. Um, and yeah, for the most part, I think that's kind of what we got. Like I was
Yeah,
definitely going into it. I was nervous just at the idea of of the two guys being in charge and the questions around what it's going to look like and how it's all going to work and what their real goals on the ice are. And I don't think any of that was answered. So it's just one of those
I
things.
think that's a very good way to put it. Like I think as I said before, that you kind of get the answers that you're looking for in this presser. But when I
Yeah,
say
yeah.
that, it's more just the like you. I think what you expected, like you said, is kind of what you got from it. Maybe less the actual explicit answers on questions, more
Yeah.
just what were your expectations? This is what I think is going to happen. Okay, this is what happened. So in that sense, because I do think you leave with a lot of question marks still. And I think, yeah, that kind of sums up how I felt going into it. Um, yeah, I guess let's talk about kind of the first impressions then from let's you want to start with Shaka or Sundin and just kind of what they got
No,
into
I
in
think
that
I'll
presser.
start with Chayka. That's fine with
Sure.
me. I think there's a little
Yeah.
bit more there to go through, but I mean, I'll start by saying, and maybe this is just me being a sheep or something, but like, I will say that I am impressed by the way that he carries himself and the way that he speaks. Like, it's clear that he is a smart guy. I think it's, I think it's clear that he knows hockey enough to kind of go through the motions of what a GM does, especially if he has some help. Whether or not he has enough, I think is still up for debate. But I think that, yeah, like I think that he will at some point represent the team well, and I think it's understood that he is a very smart guy and will be able to deal with the job. That being said, I do question the way that he again the lack of hockey talk. I will say in these type of press conferences, and it's become kind of even a little bit with Brad Treliving. I think we started to kind of move into that sphere where the questions were no longer really about the team on the ice. The questions were about things happening off the ice and things happening in the building and other things, right? So it was just, yeah, like I like that we talked about quotes, like I like that he talked about needing a mobile defenseman or needing more than that, or needing a number one. Like there was at least some understanding that, hey, like I do, even if it's just written down,
Yeah.
it's like, hey, I do care a little bit about the team on the ice. Like I'm not just here
Something
to
that we
be
can
here.
latch onto and is concrete
Yeah,
on the roster, and we can be like, okay, that is something we've
yeah.
been saying. Like this
And at
team
the
on the
very
back end
least,
needs
like,
more puck moving. Yeah.
yeah, and then it implies that that's something that he is planning to
Has
address,
studied and yeah. Yeah.
which I think he should get credit for. Which honestly, like he probably hasn't so far. I think a lot of people think like
Yeah.
similar
Yeah.
to Pelly, it's like, hey, he's kind of up there just making stuff up. Like I don't think that's the case with Chayka at all. But
Yeah.
I want to.
I think you're right that he's not making stuff. Sorry, finish. You got what do you
No,
got
I
there?
was just gonna say that I think that he's again. I think he will be a capable person, whether or not he needs help, and where this is going to kind of lead in terms of what, not necessarily what his responsibilities are, because it seems clear that he's going to be the guy making decisions when it comes down to it. But like, yeah, what his philosophy is on how to build a team. He talked a lot about roster construction, but he didn't use any actual hockey words. He was just like, it's a lot of leadership.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, culture and using words, those typical buzzwords. But I didn't feel like I
Something that
learned
we kind of criticized Ross Atkins for a lot, let's say, right? Is that fair
100%.
to
And
say? Early Ross
that's
Atkins
fair.
too, because I
Yeah.
think Ross is maybe slightly better at it. He's definitely still has that in him, but like
Yeah.
maybe sometimes a little too jargony. Like you want more, like you said, concrete examples, less just kind of vague statements. Because
Yeah.
stuff did feel vague at times. I think the one area, and this is across multiple of the interviews with Shaika, that I will kind of come at him for. Not even come at him, but I just something I noticed. He's asked early on to kind of address the cheating scandal in Arizona involving his illegal prospect combine before draft, private combine, and then the suspension, which had nothing to do with the combine, had to do with him looking for a job while still being employed by the Coyotes and basically lying to the owner. And he totally deflected from that question. He talked about
Yeah.
instability and how there's stability here in Toronto. I think that was an opportunity for him to kind of give himself a clean slate and say like, yeah, like, he had this in his opening statement where he did say, I've made some good decisions. I've made some bad ones, paraphrasing here. I'm a human and I'm better for all of it. He had a statement where he said that. That is a singular sentence. And I think when you're kind of asked to address things from your past multiple times throughout the day, and he deflected from every single one of these opportunities, I didn't love that. Now,
Yeah.
eh, talk is cheap. And he also mentioned this. This is one of the things that we can give him credit for. He had a line where he basically said, once again, paraphrasing here, like talk doesn't get you credibility in Toronto,
Yeah.
actions do.
Yeah.
So it is good to know. And, this is a prepared statement. Like it's not like speaking from the heart, whatever, but, he put it out there. He put it on record. What the hell I say here today, doesn't really matter. I need to go out and do it. And he's
Yeah.
100% right on that front. Another example where he didn't kind of address some of the more messy stuff is in the interview with Elliot Friedman, the sit down one-on-one that they did in the Leafs locker room. He's asked to he's asked what's changed since he was the GM in Arizona. And he defaults, and it's a totally correct thing to say. Like, I was single, I'm now married and have 3 kids. Like, those are truths. Like, that's totally fair to say. Um, but there wasn't much else that you can really cling on to there and say, this is a guy who's learned. This is a
Yeah.
guy who, he's I think I wanted to see a little bit more. Maybe humility is the word. And, maybe this has already been done behind the scenes. I'd hope so, right? That's where it matters, to be honest. And then Elliot followed it up with, how have you changed? And he talked about the stability again in Toronto. Like, I can think of 3 opportunities for him to kind of own up to the mistakes a little bit more. I don't think it would have cost him anything. I don't think if he had done that, I think it would have bought him more credibility, let's say, or just more leeway. Not that these guys deserve any benefit of the doubt or kind of blind faith, like they have to earn it this summer. But I'm not fully understanding of why he was holding the cards back on that. It makes me feel like like I said, I'm left to make up this opinion here because you haven't brought it forth. I hope behind doors it's different, but I'm left to think that maybe you haven't changed enough in your 5 years out of the league, right? That's kind of where I'm at. Did you kind of get that sense, or am I overblowing it?
No, I mean, I think most people wanted to hear a different version of events, like you said, like from him in a more humble way and acknowledging maybe he acknowledged mistakes, but exactly what those were and what he's learned from them. I assume, like you talked about, I assume in the due diligence that they provided, obviously the Leafs asked and got a response that they thought was satisfactory. And I would imagine it was the truth about what actually happened there. But I do kind of um I do kind of hold that to Chayka in terms of I think it's more his ego that maybe is not allowed. It doesn't want to come out and admit defeat in front of
I,
everybody, and
I
I think
think you're
that's
right.
fine. And I
Yeah,
think that's fine, and I think
he's a
that's
proud
probably
guy. You can tell.
I think that's a quality that they like about him, and that's fine. And like I think that's a good thing. But again, it's like yeah, what it doesn't give a good image about what might have looked like behind the scenes, when they're trying to get information from this guy. And if he's still, putting forth the kind of story about how, he just needed more help around him. And he'll no doubt get that in Toronto because he certainly
Yeah,
won't be left alone to make some of the
no,
mistakes that he had
there
he
won't
had
be an
talked
excuse
about.
this time.
So it all just comes down to, yeah, like whether or not they believe that he's, of the quality of manager that can do the job. And I think that's still left to be seen because of the way that things went in Arizona. But um, yeah, it's just one of those things where we kind of have to see what the actions are now that we've heard the words, and everyone will have their own opinions based on that. So it's just going to be a fun summer to really find out maybe more about Chayka himself, but also yeah, what his plans are for the group and whether or not it's his vision going forward, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think that sums it up well. We can move on to the Sundin part of this equation now. Do you feel like you have any more clarity? And I'd say before the presser, we had no clarity. Do you feel like you have any bit of clarity on what Matt Sundin does for the team? Like, what is his role? What is he doing? Because I don't know. I don't know yet.
I don't know either, to be honest. And
Okay.
obviously, like we can look at the way that this all went down in I think a different, a couple different ways. Like the fact that he was apparently floated as a potential president, and then with it seemingly taking so long for him to decide. To me, it sounds like he said, "Hey, like I want to be involved, but I don't think I want to be like the figurehead of it all." And they said,
Sounds
"Okay,
like some humility
yeah,
from his part,
yeah."
right?
And you can
So,
see that in him. Like Chayka's trying to, giving him the opportunity to answer questions, and he's
yes,
kind of saying, "Hey, I'm
yes,
good." Like, you're the guy, and like, I think he part of that is his humility, but I think part of that is yeah, maybe his hesitancy to kind of take that step and be a business leader or, a leader of men in a different way than he's used to. What I don't hate the idea that they are giving him room to grow into a
I
potential
agree.
role like that by saying, "Hey, he's not just an advisor who's not going to show up and just going to whatever." Like we've got people, every team has those that seeming, behind the scenes guys that just kind of give their advice, I'm sure, but aren't really, around the building as much or aren't credited with as much success. I think they're saying, hey, we want him around to the capacity that he's willing to. This is that capacity right now, but get used to seeing more and more of him as the years go by, maybe. So I think that to me is a good thing. Gives him a chance to build his own brand and his own style and try to find out where he fits. Because you can see that he's, while obviously a very smart hockey mind and I think will be a force to reckon with at some point as an executive, you can see that he still is hesitant about saying certain things or offering his opinion on certain things, or even probably the knowledge that he has about how an organization might work in 2026. So it's just going to be again, it's just going to be fun to see him around and seeing him involved in different ways. The stuff with the lottery last night was awesome. The videos afterwards and him and Chayka going down to the rink at what was it, the Ford Performance
Hilarious.
Center, and like it's
I've
just like
played
yeah,
a fair share of like beer league games at that very rink. Like that
yeah,
is the Toronto Maple Leafs practice ice. Like there's been I'll never forget like when the Leafs a couple years ago traded for Ryan O'Reilly. You
Right.
see video like the day after O'Reilly's at practice and they're like drawing up plays, or whatever. And then like I go to that rink that night and you see like you still have the marker smudges on the boards of like what they were
I
drawing up.
love
I'm like,
that.
God, Ryan O'Reilly was just here. Now here I am at 11 p.m. playing this terrible game. You know what I mean? Like it. So that was cool.
Yeah.
I really like that. Not to derail you there. Do you have anything else? Because I think you're bang on with
No,
what you're hitting here.
the other thing I'd say is that, like, I think that it was a smart decision to bring in Mats, but thank God, I think almost that was willing to do this, because the alternative, whether that's Chayka on his own or Chayka with somebody else, like I don't think it really became. Maybe it would have been a Mike Gillis type. Like maybe Gillis was just there to talk about these two guys, but like yeah, I think it. I don't know if this might have like this. It might work out. Like I'm not on the in the camp that this is like doom and gloom. That these guys are not going to be able to get it done. Like I think there's a chance this works, but they should be very careful about the
Yeah.
next couple of years, especially in terms of getting things going with Mats for it. Like trying to figure it out.
I meant to bring this up kind of before we got into the actual details of the press conference, but we'll do it now, and then I'll give you some Sundin thoughts as well.
Okay.
Like part of kind of going into this and why there was so much skepticism, right? Like I think any Leafs fan and their skepticism going into this era is well founded based on things like logic, reason, evidence, past track records, lack of past track records. Like those are
Yeah.
all real tangible things, and you should be skeptical, or you should be a skeptic based on all those things. Like it's tough to, like, if you have all these things presented in front of you and you're asked like, are you a skeptic or an optimist about this situation going forward? I think you'd be crazy to be optimistic about it. So two things can be true though. Everyone is right to enter this era with skepticism. We can all be open to being proven wrong. And I think a ton of people in Toronto are open to being proven wrong. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you should be criticizing their skepticism for this. Like, I think people are overblowing how many people have already made up their mind, whether that's in a negative or a positive sense. I think
Yeah.
for the most part, Toronto is in this in-between area, which is where you should be. You're very aware of the past history of John Chayka and lack of past history as an exec for Mats Sundin. And those are reasons you shouldn't feel fantastic about this moving forward. You're open to be proven wrong. You're open to a guy who's getting a second chance as an exec. You're open to a player who is a franchise cornerstone, really feeling connected to this team and want to be part of. He feels like he has a mission that he hasn't completed yet. Like you should feel
Yeah.
open to
Yeah.
that. So I just wanted to address that because I feel like there's been a lot of black and white, and the reality is there's so much gray to this. There is so much gray. Don't know if you have anything on that front, or else I can move on to some Sundin stuff.
No, I would just say that I think a lot of fans were just concerned because they heard the messaging from the team, and
Hands up, right? Like,
there's a
yeah,
lot of smart hockey fans in Toronto, and they're not going to just be like, "Oh, the team thinks they're going to be better next year, so that's great. We should be happy about what's next." Knowing that their prospects and picks, were at a low point, and they had now no general manager, and people were speculating about the coach, and there was no reason to be optimistic. And then they make decisions that are questionable, and then like you said, the track record, and now we finally have this one like piece of optimistic expectation with a young player that's going to come in no matter what, and it's just like it's a feeling that we haven't had in Toronto in a little bit, and it's just nice to kind of feel that things can shift, and
yeah.
again those smart hockey fans can start to speculate on things that are going to help the team as opposed to where they've been in the past.
I would clarify too that I think like this stance in terms of like being open to this working out, this is removed from the draft lottery. Like I still think there's a world where either they're keeping 5, would probably be more doom and gloom if they had no pick, but even where you're keeping the pick, I think a lot of
Gross.
people are still open to this
They
working
lost
out.
if they lost that pick
No,
last night, it
been
would have
miserable.
been
Would have been miserable.
today
No,
would have been a terrible day.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely
No, it
brutal,
would have been
like, just
terrible.
brutal. Yeah,
Terrible. On the
like
Sundin front, me and you have had conversations leading up to this week about two things that don't have to be mutually exclusive: good PR hires and actual good hires. And they don't have to be mutually exclusive. But I think the way you laid out the Sundin aspect of this proves that. Like, this can be a good PR hire that Leaf fans will rally around, and that is smart to do if you're ownership. Fair, right? But there's still a world where all of that is true, and this ends up working out. And I think that path is the one you laid out. He's coming into this role that has been defined as senior executive advisor, which, according to Keith Pelly, Sundin didn't find out until the contract was presented in front of him, which is, it's crazy. Like, just
But I
not
think
knowing
that proves my point a little bit, that it's like, hey,
this
these
is
are
very
kind of what we
open-ended.
want. Yes, it's like, we want you in here, and then they're probably waiting, like, in what capacity are you willing to do? And he said, well, I'd be
I
willing to
agree.
do this, this, and this for the
Yeah.
organization. That didn't include oversight over player decisions, or you know what I mean? So, like,
And I think that's smart. So it is a smart decision on the team's behalf with this title that I know not everyone loves. Like, basically what I would call senior executive advisor is not senior advisor like Shane Doan and not president of hockey operations like Brendan Shanahan. It is somewhere in between there. That is Mats Sundin's role. And to your point,
Yeah.
like, I think the Shane Doan comparison, that's the floor for Sundin this year. Maybe not even the floor. Maybe that's where he ends up at the end of this year. Because to your point, what we heard from Sundin was, like, he did a lot of, he had his kind of his bullet points, and he would kind of always return to them. It was a lot of, I represent the past eras of the Leafs. We have Tucker, Gilmore, and Clark here in attendance, and they had things that were positive and negative. I had things in my era that were positive and negative. I'm here to transfer that knowledge to Chayka so that we can positively influence the future and avoid some of the mistakes of the past. I think that's a fine foundation. It can't be the everything of your approach, because I think that you could end up rubbing people the wrong way in terms of, like, back in my day, we did. It's a little bit of that, or like, get off my lawn, kid. It's a bit of that. But I think he said, like, I've watched the Leafs of the past 10 years. I keep in touch with the prospects. I look at the national game. But what we didn't hear a lot of, and like what we're still waiting on, is what he's doing day to day. And I think the honest truth is he himself doesn't know yet. And I think that's okay, because they're not expecting different of him. I think they are on the same page in terms of the expectations, like you said. Open-ended in terms of how involved he is to start. Maybe they agree on what the end point is. Maybe they do want him to become this full-fledged Brendan Shanahan, but is going to take time, an undefined amount of time. And you're fine to question it as someone watching here in Toronto, that, like, hey, this is a team that really wants to get back to the cup right now. Why is the guy learning on the job? That's not great. Fair. But I think that's their approach to it, is, Sundin's going to start out in this minimal role. He's going to kind of carve out his own. He might realize that he wants to be at morning skate twice a week, in the office 4 days a week, in the locker room once a month, talking to Chayka 3 times a day. Like, he's going to find it out. And I think the reality is he himself doesn't know the day-to-day yet. I'm comfortable with that for now.
Well, and I even go a step farther to say that whatever we hear, say towards the beginning of the season, we get a little bit more information. That will be vastly different from what we hear at the end of the year, or going into the year after that. Like, he's going to continue to, I think, pick up responsibilities and grow into a role at some point. Is that going to be just an advisory role? I highly doubt that. So yeah, I think it, but I think it's rare, and maybe it's different because it's Toronto, but like, typically you don't have to have the pomp and circumstance, I guess, to do this. Like, I look at St. Louis with what they're doing with Alex Steen, and it's like, he's been there. He's been, I guess, an AGM, or evenally became the GM. I'm not exactly
he
sure
went,
what
like,
the
through the
situation
ranks,
is.
like Danny Briere
Exactly.
in the Q, right? Like,
I
it's
think,
like, that's part of the skepticism here, is franchise icon to front
yeah,
office with nothing in between.
like, I don't
I
think
don't know if Sakic did that. Maybe
that's a good
he did
point. I'm
that.
not sure. Yeah, he might have jumped right in, and that was a
Yeah.
different situation. But I do kind of view Mats almost as like kind of a glorified GM or AGM who's kind of going to be learning along. But they just didn't want to, like, say, like, you're not going to call him like an assistant general, like,
It's a
at
lot
least
of
not right
semantics.
off the,
It's a
yeah.
lot of
And that's why
optics. It's a lot of semantics.
they came up with a title that they thought encapsulated what
Yeah.
people might want to hear or what they understand. But again, that's not a bad thing at all. Like, I'd rather have him doing this than him not being with the team and then being like, oh yeah, he's still going to be advisory or whatever. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, you got to start somewhere. And I think for this portion of history, like this is a decent idea. Just, and I think more people are concerned about the Chayka part of it all than what's going on with Sundin. So it will probably work
I think you're
itself out
right.
in that factor. Yeah.
Um, let's do some. Actually, let's do before Berube. The Steve Simmons
Yeah.
question stole the show, right? My take on this is I think Steve's line of questioning is fine. I think he definitely asked it in a more combative way. And I think you can have the perspective of, as my dog, just tries to lick the mic here. Like, you
That's
can have
awesome.
the perspective that, um, like, Keith Pelly could have maybe went more like to bat, let's say, or like been more on the defensive, and he was more kind of brushing it aside, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I think either perspective is fine to have, really. But I just think that this is what for Simmons, like, this from kind of like what we have learned in the past about like interviewing, and that's maybe more in a one-on-one setting, but I think even in a scrum setting, press conference setting, you kind of have to have like a mental flow chart of what is your question? What do you think the answer is going to be? What is your follow up depending on what that answer is? And so I think for me, where I question Simmons a bit is, did you think you were going to get a productive answer out of that question? Because I listened to it and I don't know what you can reasonably expect to get from the question that is productive. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And that was my thoughts exactly. I think the biggest issue with Steve was that in his questioning, he lost. I think he did to himself what he obviously was hoping would happen to Keith Pelly, and that Steve Simmons in that moment lost his composure, and I think was shocked by Pelly's, answer or lack of an answer. And then he went on the offensive, and I think that's where he got into trouble a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think his intentions were right. Like, he was trying to get an answer to a question that a lot of people want. But I think you're right. Like, I'm not sure that was the questioning the way he had written it down. I'm sure when he showed up to
Yeah.
the press conference. So I think it was just a moment it was unfortunate, but yeah, like, I mean, credit. I gotta give Pelly credit. Like, regardless, like, he kept his cool up there, and he stood to what they believed. Obviously behind the scenes they have some faith in Chayka that he's going to be the guy to kind of lead them for this next period of time. So I understand they are not obligated to tell us everything that they believe, but like, it would have been nice, I guess, to hear, yeah, a little bit more, something to feel relatable to him, or to understand that he understands what people are looking for, and that it's not people trying to attack
Yeah.
the team or trying to get. It's not. I understand the questions feel like they're like a gotcha, but people generally are not trying to do that. They just want to know information that they feel is relevant. So I mean, that's where I'll
Yeah.
sit with that. But I would just say that I
I,
think
I think the questioning from even like beyond Simmons, like I think the questioning across the board was fair. It was
100%.
fair, right? And
Yeah.
but I would also say there was probably a lot of preconceived notions on either side, like the media side and from the Leaf side of things. And
Yeah.
that probably did kind of influence some of the uncomfortability of the press conference, right? It didn't feel like usual. It definitely didn't. There was so much noise
No.
around this going in and during that, I'm used to like a tight buttoned, just squeaky clean presser avail from the Leafs like over the past decade, basically ever since Shanahan took over. Um, yeah, in 2014. So this felt like a departure of that. Now, maybe they grow into kind of their own style, right? Like I said, I think you can kind of identify the pressers and avails of those era. Maybe we're gonna end up having a way to identify the ones from this era. And you know what? At the end of the day, I really do think, and we'll move on from the presser stuff after this, but like the biggest takeaway, the biggest line that I'm taking from this introductory meetings is the Chayka line of, talk is cheap, doesn't earn me credibility here, doesn't earn Sundin credibility here. We got to do stuff. We got to go and do stuff. So
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
truth.
and even
That's the truth.
he closed his opening statement by just saying, like, "We gotta get to work here." Like, I believe him when he says those things. It's not he doesn't strike me the guy. I get the reporting is out there, but he seems like he generally, especially being from the area, it's like there's a reason that he got into this in the first place, I imagine, and it's maybe to end up right here, and we'll see where it all goes. Like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
you can't rule it out
Here,
until you, like you said.
yeah, no, ruling it out one way or another is not productive at all. Like things have to happen. I always say this, and it just applies to talking sports, really debating about anything. Like you have to enter every conversation slash argument ready to have your mind changed, right?
Yep.
If you're having a conversation with someone and you've already decided, no matter what this guy says, like you cannot change my mind. Well, it's a waste of breath. It's a waste of breath. So that's what I'd say about that. And I don't know if I've brought this up to you. Like one example I can think of a GM hiring that I was so incredibly skeptical of. Like I thought, oh my god, what the hell are these guys doing? And it ended up working out fantastic. There's definitely context to this. So I'll get into this, but I think back to Don Waddell, who was a GM of the Atlanta Thrashers, then disappeared from the NHL as the Thrashers did, and returned with the Carolina Hurricanes. Since Waddell took over, and that was the beginning of the Dundon era, it's also the beginning of the Tulsky era. But since
Right.
then, it's only been up for the Hurricanes. As much as you want to talk about like conference finals failures and whatever,
Yeah.
to say
Yeah.
they haven't been a sustainable and successful franchise, you can't. So, like I said, the context there is how much of the heavy lifting was Eric Tulsky doing while Waddell was the GM. But I think early returns on Waddell and Columbus, they're interesting. Let's say that. I think there's been some positive and negative, but I think he was a guy where the track record would tell you, and it's similar. Thrashers and Coyotes, you can definitely draw a lot of comparisons there. Uh, and I based my entire opinion about that going in. Turns out the preconceived notion, there's a lot of context. Like, what if there ends up being a Tulsky to Chayka, right? Like, even if it is Tulsky who did heavy lifting, this is a front office that is still taking shape. We don't know if a Brandon Pridham's sticking around. We don't know about a Ryan Hardy, the bajillion other AGMs other than Shane Doan. We know he is gone. But like, there is a lot to be decided here. And as much as Chayka and Sundin is the foundation of it, there's going to be bits and pieces that influence negatively or positively how this front office is going to work going forward.
100%.
All right, Craig Berube. Um, this feels like preconceived notions. They should have maybe already fired this guy. Do you feel any different?
I would say that they probably should have fired him with Trilliping.
Yes, I think that's fair.
I
Well, now you look at it and you're like, God, I mean, this is just
Well,
the
I mean,
fan aspect of it, but
it
like,
all worked out
yes,
the way it did,
exactly.
yes. But I mean,
Exactly.
like,
But
yeah, in terms of, like, setting the tone for, like, what you're gonna do for it, because I would normally say, if they say things were going okay, like, whatever, they weren't in the situation they were, and, they didn't have to fire the general manager. Like, normally, I would say, even if you stumble, you keep the coach, you wanna have some sort of stability through the off season, and then going into the season, if you're not doing well, we've seen in the NHL getting the coach bump and doing
yeah,
that probably is the better option than doing it in the middle of an off season or trying to establish something different. Um, but for the Leaf situation, like, yeah, like, I don't really think there's any benefit to them starting the season with Berube if their intention is not to completely finish the season with him, no matter what. Like, and I think that it will be because I think that's the signal that we've been getting so far. But
yeah,
I I don't know. I think, yeah, it all depends on what, the guys that are going to be there upcoming season, how they feel about him, and if they're willing to play the way that they did, just not too long ago, a season ago, I guess I would say, where things were clearly working to some degree. There were some different faces, of course, but I think if you're able to work with Berube, and we know there should be a decent level of turnover with some of this roster, you I can understand seeing if his system might work again. And that's not to say that I believe it will, but I'm not against the idea that it's something that could work and something that we've seen work. And again, it all just depends, like, if they have a true, collaboration, because it's not about just getting the team to Berube and then he takes it and runs. Like, I think, and maybe that's part of all these decisions, is like Berube will probably be in some at some level he'll be, his opinions will be considered, and he'll be, able to have some feedback in terms of what he's looking for as well. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's I don't necessarily think that it's the worst decision in the world, but I think if I had my choice, yeah, I don't think I would have gone into the off season with him as my coach still. But I understand there's lots of factors there with the money owed to him and everything too. Like, we know what they're like
Important
now.
context, important factors. It feels like part of this discussion is being
Absolutely.
shaped by, yeah, like we believe the number is somewhere in the 7 millions over 2 years on Craig Berube's contract. And I think that they are weary of paying two coaches at the same time. That would change if Berube were fired and then hired by another team. That team ends up taking his remaining salary. But that's
And
potentially a
I'll
risk they don't want to take. Yeah,
and
sorry.
if I can just add one more thing, now that we're on that subject, it's like, it, the reason why I'm skeptical, and why I'd probably almost say keep Berube if you've got your full trust behind him and you're going to give him everything he kind of needs, or at least, have him work with you, is that because they owe him so much, there's no doubt in my mind that if they had fired him, they weren't going to go get the best available coach who was going to be, asking for the most money, most likely, like a Bruce
Yeah,
Cassidy. Like, there's no
that's the name
way
everyone like. That is basically the remaining name for
they would not
NHL
go pay Cassidy
coaches.
4 or 5 million a year and then still be paying Berube whatever it is a year. They would go get a
Is that
young guy who has no experience, who they can probably lowball and say, "This is where we're gonna build it up." That might have worked, and maybe
Yeah,
that's
like
an
I think of
option,
Dan Muse, I
but
think of Spencer
shoot,
Carberry, I
100%.
think of let's say like even Warsofsky in San Jose, though I don't know how much credit he's really given for their success so far. But like there's examples where like you can make a cost effective and a smart decision. Going back to the skepticism, maybe it's like maybe I'd be naive to like put that trust in them to make a hiring that satisfies
Well, no
both
doubt about that,
cost
yeah.
and actual need.
Especially when they didn't have any hockey executives left, like, what were they gonna do? Like,
Yeah,
I guess unless you were gonna
yeah.
put it on a Pridham or put it on someone else to take the blame if it goes poorly, I guess, but, like, I don't know.
uh Yeah, I wanted to reference a conversation that was had on Kipper and Bourne, and God, I don't even remember which day it was. Obviously, it was either Monday or Tuesday, but they blend together. I've listened to a ton of content from so many different places. But Nick brought up the point that like let's not be too quick to talk about like Berube being a goner, from the perspective that let's say they were to have fired Berube and brought in Bruce Cassidy, and let's say they were still bad next year. What the hell do you do then? Because you figure Bruce Cassidy is one of those shelf life coaches who is for a competitive team to win a Stanley Cup. He's not a developmental coach, right? And then what the hell are you doing, right? You're firing him after a year. You're going to pay two coaches out of a job. Like it doesn't make sense. Keeping Berube keeps your options open in terms of, let's say, a month into the season, you suck.
Yeah.
You can either then keep Berube for the whole year like you did this year, because I mean, well, maybe you wouldn't because you don't have a pick next year, but you can do that because at that point, the rest of the year you might as well say it's a throwaway, whatever.
Yeah.
Or you can then make a coaching change a month, 2 months in, say, well, we're gonna have to rebuild. We got to face the music here, and we're just gonna go and get that young up and coming coach instead. He also referenced an example of this where like this exact scenario is played out. Mike Sullivan. God, the Rangers, so many examples for us. Like they're telling us everything not to do.
Yeah. I wonder why.
Right?
Yeah, exactly,
So
yeah.
I mean, there's a team that thought they were going to be right back to contender status this year. They bring in Mike Sullivan. Everyone says it's a great move. This is a guy who coached Team USA to gold at the Olympics. It went terrible this year. It went freaking terrible, and I don't
Oh,
think
yeah.
anybody actually expects it to get that much better next year. Is Mike Sullivan the guy that you want kind of figuring this out? Well, they don't have a choice. They're stuck with him. They're going to have to figure it out, whether it goes well or not. So,
Yeah.
another cautionary tale.
Well, and that's why, like, the whole idea of, like, having of them potentially having the opportunity to have kind of done a reset here this summer, it does make a lot of sense, but it just isn't the way that they've signaled. So it doesn't make sense. And I think coaching the NHL, like to me, if I was running a team, like I'd honestly be running in like a 3-year system when it comes to coaches. It's like you give any given guy 3 years. Beyond that, you go year to year with them if you have the opportunity to do that, or you're just like you're ready to move on because yeah, it feels like things are always changing, or that your roster has so much turnover, or that there's just so much going on in today's NHL that like you're almost like not able to give longer term deals because you can't predict where anything's going to be.
It feels a little
And
bit
if
like the goalie market, right? Like how many elite
yeah,
goaltenders do
yeah,
we see in the NHL anymore? Like that number is
yeah,
shrinking, and I think that's the same for coaches, right? Like
yeah.
the fraternity of coaches who are kind of like for example, John Cooper has been eliminated from the first
Yes.
round 4 years in a
Yes.
row. We don't even bat an eye. That's how
No.
good of a coach he is. Like no one even is ready to say that they would even consider firing him. So I think you're
And
right.
there's
Like
so few of those
that's kind of
guys,
the new
like,
NHL. Yeah.
you have to take your risk, and that's why I think you're seeing a new group of young guys because, A, they're not controllable is the wrong word, but, like, let's be realistic, like, they're fresh, you can kind of dictate what the
Hmm.
team can dictate what they're kind of looking to do, but then, as they get more experience and stuff, you hope that loyalty and connections remain so that you can kind of build something longer term. But most likely what ends up in more situations than not, what ends up happening is that there's a small cycle of success and then things end up back at the beginning and the team
Yeah.
wants to restart and then puts it on the coach or whatever. And it's unfortunate that that's the way it happens. But I think, we look at Vegas and while they've made changes, in coaches, I think twice in their, is it twice? Maybe three times
Gallant to
in their,
DeBoer to Cassidy to
yeah, three.
Torts.
So I mean, and that's in the last 10 years or less, right?
Yep.
So you have to like the important thing is your roster having a vision and constructing what you think is going to, and part of that is what Chayka said, like building a farm system that allows you to continue to build and turn
Yeah.
things over and make the right decision into, is it this year or next year that we're going to take that step
Yeah.
or whatever, right? So
If the front office is like the foundation of the house, let's say
yeah,
the coach, not to, this is definitely
honestly,
diminishing the role, but
yeah, I
coat
know
of
where you're
paint.
going, I think. I was gonna say like the gardener, like, someone just aesthetically pleasing, makes it look
Yeah.
nice, is
Yeah.
the kind of
I
the
think coat of paint, right?
represents it,
Really,
like,
it's
it's
really
very
easy to
similar.
just like, if I just want to,
Yeah,
change the color in this room, like,
yeah,
I can
yeah,
do that.
yeah.
But God, you want me to rip out the foundation of the base? Like,
No, exactly.
brother, what are you talking about? Right. So,
But I think
yeah,
people get
I
the
think that's
idea that,
fair.
like, the coach represents more of a change than
Yeah.
like, people talked about, like, if the Leafs had hired Cassidy or DeBoer, would they have got this many more points versus that many more points? I don't really think that makes much of a difference when the roster was so poor, and although they were being, systematically, they weren't playing their best game, I guess, with Berube, but, like, other than, maybe I would say you get maybe 2 or 4 points swing either way because those first couple of games, the team's gonna
Yeah.
play great, and then beyond that, maybe you can build something. But I don't think that it's something that would have, drastically changed the Leaf season if they had made its decision in January when they were going on a run anyway with Berube. So it was like it wasn't until the after the Olympics when it was like, oh, now they're actually going to be
We
out of it.
really
Okay,
suck.
yeah,
Yeah.
like what can we do? And at that point, like you said, why you're just going to spend more money to not be in the playoffs? So like, what does it
Yeah.
matter?
All right, last part I've got here for us to cover, Brando. The
Yeah,
Auston Matthews report via Chris Johnston of The Athletic. This also came out yesterday before the draft lottery. I listened to CJ's podcast as well.
yeah, that's right.
Man, the tone in that pod before the draft lottery, like I can't wait to listen to their next show. Shout out Julian McKenzie and Chris Johnston. That is going to be a very interesting listen. One thing he brought up in that podcast is everyone talks about CJ's they were a juggernaut prediction about the Montreal
Yeah,
Canadiens back in the day. This is a hilarious one to look back on. He later in the podcast, kind of as they're wrapping up their Leafs stuff, says, I'm putting the over under for Leafs to make the playoffs at like 5 years. That's
yeah, yeah.
incredible reverse jinx. Definitely not intended by CJ, but hey, man, kudos to CJ. That is a incredible. Listen, it could still be true. Like this could still all fall. But in terms of the line has shifted since
Oh, I
CJ
can
has said
imagine.
that.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
line has shifted. Just want to reference that. But yeah, his report here, as I just find kind of the key line, it is essentially should have had this ready here. But it was basically that Auston Matthews is undecided today. He's not going to be decided after meeting with Chayka and Sundin once. He needs to not only hear the plan, see the plan on a piece of paper, but then does the plan for this offseason actually happen? I think we're basically going to be waiting on an Auston Matthews decision until like July 15th. My initial reaction to this is totally fair from Austin's point of view. I don't know why you would settle for a plan like referencing Steve Simmons here. You want to talk about like snake oil salesman, right? Like,
Yeah.
let me
Yeah.
tell you this great thing that we're going to do. It's going to change your life. Like, we are going to win 5 cups in a row, Austin. Is he supposed to just be like, I'm in? No, hell no. Right? Like, he
Yeah.
has to see some of the stuff happen. John, what is the plan here? Like, who you talking about puck moving defensemen? I'm looking at free agency and I'm seeing no one. Like, how do you plan to do this? Well, Matthews, we're looking at this guy. You know, he's a free agent. He's lower down the chart, but we think we can get some excess, this and that. Like you know, he needs to see stuff happen, right? So, do you feel like it's unfair of Matthews to ask for this kind of not even treatment, but why should he be decided until he sees things happen?
Well, yeah, and I know, like, obviously everyone's thoughts on the off season, but for me, like, this almost signals more that for me, I don't think there's much to debate that. I think he'll be there, I hope, on game one of the season next year. But I think what he means and what maybe some of the signals are is that he's not decided on playing the full season with the Leafs. Like, I think there's an element of like, okay, I'll see what we do in the offseason. Obviously, a number one pick helps. That's a bit of the start of the plan. Let's see what we do. We pick up whoever whatever moves, free agency, trades, whatever we do. Let's go into the training camp. Let's see what the team looks like. Start the season. Maybe we get off to a good start. Oh, okay. I'm seeing parts of the plan. Maybe last year was a bit of an aberration. Maybe we have still something here. Maybe this, a young kid can step in and play and help see kind of where this is going. But on the flip side of that, obviously, like, it's very possible that he, prior to yesterday or last night, was sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, there's no way this team is going to be competitive next year. There's no way they have a plan to get us back to where we were. Are you kidding me? Like, what are you going to do? You go get Mitch or something, like, back again or something?" Like, it's like, what? There was no reason for him to sit there and be like, "Oh yeah, they're going to figure it out." I'm sure he's sitting back questioning some of the decision making just like all of us, and that would be totally fair of him as well. So yeah, I think it's going to be, we're going to have to take it day by day this summer, and then once we get to training camp and put together the team, and I think that's when it'll start to feel, obviously it'll feel real, because it'll be the Leafs, almost last
Yeah.
chance to sell him on what this future could look like. But I don't know. I want to say that I want to say that he's continuing that stance of keeping his options open, I guess, is kind of what it is. And that's every athlete in today's industry, or in today's landscape. Like, show me the guy who, before his contract year goes and says like, yeah, I'm committed to these guys before we even, put pen to paper. It's like, no, you're not even, an agent wouldn't even let you say that anymore. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's just one of those things where it's like, let's see where it goes. But I do have, I have some faith in Austin that he does still want to be here, and he's just you gotta see it to believe it first, right? So exactly like you were saying.
Yeah, I've got multiple directions to go on this, and just before I do that, the context of kind of the crux of CJ's report here. This is from his article. He says the only sales pitch Matthews needs at this stage is real action, according to league sources. Before committing to another season in Toronto, he wants to see a roster that has been meaningfully upgraded through trades and free agency. This isn't about selling him on a fancy 12-point plan or a bunch of vague promises. Seeing is believing. Okay.
But even that, like going to last year, they lost Mitch, and then they did all these little ancillary things, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is
Yeah.
just a different way of doing it. This is still going to work out. They're probably still a playoff team." I have no, unless it's something crazy. Like I can't imagine you're going to be sitting here on September 1st when they haven't played any games yet, but maybe they've made some moves that seem interesting. That we're going to be like, "Oh yeah, Matthews is going to stay because player X is now here, or player Y." Now Gavin McKenna, that's different. I think it does change the whole idea of what this is going to look like. But for the most part, like especially the way free agency looks, like even if you bring in like a Darren Radish, someone on the defensive end, it's like okay, we've got a young kid up front, bring in maybe one of the better defensemen in the free agency. That to me doesn't necessarily just say, oh, okay, the team's ready to take off, and Auston Matthews is ready to say this team is a success story again. It's like no, we got to get out on the ice, we got to see what it looks like, what the chemistry's like, who's going to be the coach, all this different stuff, and it's like they're not going to know any of it until November, December, January, like whatever, however it
Yeah.
goes on. Like
Coinciding with kind of that coaching aspect that we were talking about, like
yeah,
same type of
there's no
timeline. Like,
not going to be
yeah.
any clarity until halfway through next year at least.
Okay. Um, the Quinn Hughes example gets brought up often.
Exact
And it's a
same
great, it's a
situation.
great example. Um, I like that's another example where it happened in like December. I think it was very early December. So maybe that is, to your point, like same type of timeline. I think from a team perspective, you'd push maybe actually for clarity sooner. But obviously the ball's not in your court; it's in Matthews's court. If he wants to like see it on the ice, like not just actually like what the roster looks like, he needs to see it play. I mean, hey, that's his prerogative. Um, so the first thing I'm going to say here is like I think people need to not be afraid of the idea that Matthews would want like to ask out.
Yeah,
A I think he has shown us and all the reporting, like once again, we know that Friedman is as close to gospel as he can get on this stuff. He has said on 32 Thoughts in the past couple months, he truly believes that Matthews values kind of his image in Toronto and wouldn't want to leave in a fashion that would sour his kind of legacy as the player
yeah,
who, has the most goals in franchise history. He now, one of his bosses now is the guy he surpassed, and we know what his exit looked like. And I'm sure there's
yeah.
regrets there. I'm sure there's not regrets. There's so many
And
layers
I'm
to
sure
that.
they will discuss that as well, both of them.
100%.
Yeah,
And I think from Sundin's point of view, you also got to be like, well, Matt's like, I also like, or Matthews, like, I understand your perspective, like, no matter what side it is, whether it's you want to stay or you want to go,
exactly.
like,
Yeah,
I can
100%.
sympathize with the team perspective now or the player's perspective. I've been on both sides of this now.
Yeah,
But I'm like I said, I think people need to not be afraid of this because kind of like we talked about with the number one overall pick, I actually don't see a doomsday outcome here. Like I honestly believe if you're telling me that Auston Matthews is unhappy with the team 2 months into the season, the idea of getting a Quinn Hughes return for Auston Matthews and then hypothetically getting another Quinn Hughes return for William Nylander, like I don't actually think that's the worst thing in the world, right? Like that means that the
yeah,
season has got off to a bad start, but the package that Quinn Hughes got back, first round pick, Marco Rossi, Zeev Buium, and Liam Ogren. Okay, that's three players who have made immediate impact at NHL level, and a first round pick. Like that's a lot. And Zeev Buium seems like he could replace Quinn Hughes to 80% of effectiveness, maybe more. And then you're adding up all the rest. Does that get you the other 20% of Quinn Hughes? It gets you pretty damn close. The other aspect of this as well, why I think people shouldn't be afraid, is because I think there's also, as much as there's like the ball is in Matthews' court to make the decision, the ball is in Matthews' court to show us that, he's a player that we really, really need to fret over keeping and like do an audition for. Because over the past 18 months, this is a player who has, let's say at most maybe reached his contract, what we're paying for him right now, but he's 2 years away from a new contract. And to be honest, if Auston Matthews is a 40 goal, 40 assist point per game player, that's a step down than what he was beforehand. And depending on what he's asking on that next contract, it's not as much of a slam dunk. Like there is onus for Auston Matthews to reach levels that he used to. Like, and maybe I don't even think that's from a performance standpoint. I think it's mainly from a health standpoint, and it doesn't have to do with the knee. It doesn't have to do with the Radko Gudas incident. It has to do with whatever the mystery injury has been over the past 18 months. That's the constant for Matthews here. That's why we had articles by Justin Bourne at the beginning of the season talking about his shot velocity and his skating speed. Those are the true telltale signs. I don't even think it's the Berube aspect of it. You can change the coach. That's not bringing back Matthews' shot velocity or his skating speed. It is the number one question for this team next year in terms of how high they can aspire to be as a contender. If Auston Matthews isn't returned to, I'm not even going to say the 69 goal scorer. He can even be a 55 goal scorer, a 100-point player. That I think is enough. But if he's not that guy, I don't feel beholden to him that I need to audition for him in the sense that, like, God, this is a disaster if he leaves. It's not in that case.
Well, and to your point too, like if he doesn't return to some level where he was before, like it might be in his best interest to want to stay to the one place that might overvalue him because of his
Yeah.
history. Like,
Yeah.
why would you want to leave the city that treats you so well if you're going to go somewhere and people are going to be kind of dropping your comps or, looking to not pay you as much because we know how free agency goes. Like, yeah, like it's a risky proposition for him no matter what. Like, it might, maybe like but yeah, you might be right. Like his best interest is like play really well, put yourself in a position to get traded for a huge package. That will lift his value as well. People will look back, oh, a year ago he got traded for all of this. Oh, he's definitely worth a raise on his contract or whatever, right? Like, and
And
it
every
opens up his
team in the world,
opportunities.
there's teams who say, I can fix him about, like,
Yes,
Nick
yes,
Robertson. You think
yes,
there's teams that are going to say, I can fix him about
yeah.
Auston frickin' Matthews? Maybe this is a straw man. Maybe there's no one out there even considering this, but, like, just to put
No,
that
but
to bed, like, no,
a
but
lot
there's going to
of,
be people lining up for that. Like, yeah,
and even without the like, take the injury part out of it, because we know
yeah,
like there's been something with Matthews over his career. Like the comparison to like Jack Eichel is unfortunately like it's lining up to be pretty perfect in that the fact of like outside of the injury and the whole he didn't like whether or not he wanted to play or whatever, like or that they would allow him to play or do the surgery, I guess was the whole thing. Like just the fact that of like a first overall pick that that looked amazing and then struggled and then eventually ended up somewhere else and flourished as a not only a obviously a great player, but also like now looks at as a better leader and obviously has had team success. Like that that is lining up almost like perfectly for the narrative for Matthews himself. If like, okay, if things don't go well, cause a bit of a stir, get myself traded. Oh, a new situation. I'm ready to put my whole, not that he's not putting 100% into it, but like
yeah,
maybe I can take time, get 100%, change things up a little bit now that I'm not in Toronto. And like, yeah, like there's a world where unfortunately, like his career takes a bit of a left turn and maybe takes off in a different way. But I don't know. I view him as a guy who, if he said out loud that he wanted to be in Toronto, which he has said in the past, but maybe not as he hasn't clarified as much recently. Like I take him at his word that he still wants to be here,
me
and I
too.
think it just comes down to the situation being right. And I don't think that's up to him really. Like the next year and a half, like it's more so
No,
like, hey,
there's,
can the group and above him and the group around him do what needs to be done to get to put him in a position to be his best, because I
yeah,
don't blame him necessarily for anything that's happened the last year, because it's
yeah,
not his fault. He's done everything he can to be available, to be his best. But like, yeah, when you're not the same group anymore, you can't change that on your own. So
yeah. You can't fault a guy for, getting kneed by Radko Gudas or
no,
whatever the mystery
of
injury is as
course,
well, right?
yeah,
Like these are
yeah,
things that, like, I have this like I'm taking this stance on this because, yeah, like if there are injury question marks,
yeah.
it's like I said, it's not even I think you could easily convince people, a healthy Auston Matthews, you're dumb to not go all in as long as you have a healthy Auston Matthews. On the
Yeah.
flip side, right? Like you if you don't have a healthy Auston Matthews, you immediately have question marks with how far you can contend. Like it is just an
Well,
immediate
if
red
he
flag.
when he's making that much money and he's your
Yes,
number one
yes,
center, yes. But you're
yes,
right in the situation where, hey, he just has to get through another 2 years with the Leafs, and then, hey, he can, if he truly has, whether it's whether his injury has diminished his ability or he's just not going to be that 60-goal guy anymore. Like, there are benefits to that for him. Like, if his true
Yeah.
goal is to be on a Stanley Cup winner, because
There's
if in
leverage
if
on
in
both sides. Like,
yeah,
I think people make it out to be that Matthews has all of the leverage, and I think
yeah,
my argument would be that he actually has things to prove to the Leafs and maybe the NHL as a whole too. Like,
1000%, yeah.
it's not just on him. Like, the idea that it's a sell job, and Chayka said, that's not the correct wording. It shouldn't be, because I think, this is a philosophy that I've talked about with so many people. Like, the face of the Toronto Maple Leafs in the post, let's say, core four era, like, has to not be a player all the time. Like, I think that's part of how they ended up in this scenario, right? Like, I think, um, we look back on the stability of the Shanahan Dubas era, and they did so many things right. It's just whatever their base philosophy was to kind of court up the core, that's where I think the flaws were. I will always make the argument that if you swapped William Nylander and David Pastrnak, I think we'd be talking about Willie as we talk about Pasta today on Boston. Like, if you just swap how they were drafted, I think we're saying, wow, look at this skilled guy in Willie who's embraced the Boston culture. Like, this guy's freaking awesome. And I think with Pasta, we'd be saying, this guy, like, he doesn't always try on defense. He's just all about the big goals and the celly. Like, so I really think that people are a product of the environment and the culture. It's part of why I have the concern with McKenna. And I think part of like another reason you shouldn't fear Matthews potentially leaving or Willie potentially leaving, because that's a departure from that culture. It lets you create a new one. So I don't think people should be in fear mode over the idea that Matthews should be gone. And I actually don't think there's a bad outcome for maybe even Matthews and the Leafs, right? Everyone should kind of get what they want. If Matthews decides he wants out, well, he'll get that. The Leafs will get assets. They need those, right? Or you'll
Yeah.
get Auston Matthews on an extension and everyone's happy. I actually don't see the bad outcome here.
Well, I mean, the Leafs, it's still Phil Kessel thing, right? Like, the worst thing you want is, like, for him to go somewhere else and then win, and then be looked at
I
as, "Oh, were the Leafs the problem?" And a lot of times people can say they
We
were the
are
problem.
like, yeah, like, but like, you
So,
can't free yourself of the problem. Like,
but the problem is they
it might
never
always be a problem with
but they don't
Matthews.
and that's well, maybe, yes, you're right, but like, they would and I think Chayka even recognized it too, like, the Matthews, if he is the player that we still believe he is, like, he's a guy that any team in the league would want any day of the week. But the problem is, yeah, like, whether or not you can rely on him to be not just the best player on a team, but also the leader, the setter, the tone setter, all these different things that on a hockey team you need. Um, but if he goes to a place where he doesn't have to be that, it's, like,
Yeah.
it could
All those
absolutely
things can
open
be
up.
true. I think it was true with Phil Kessel, but like,
But you
I
just
think
don't
back
know
to that
that.
time, like, did I feel regret that, Kessel won a cup? No,
No, but I
no,
wouldn't
like,
trust I
you
wouldn't
needed that.
trust, yes, yes, but I wouldn't trust the group right now to facilitate a Matthews trade and
I think because we
understand
have the Quinn
where
Hughes
it should
blueprint,
go.
it's so, like, you just have to look at that. Like, I
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
like, someone did
No,
it for you.
yeah.
Somebody did it,
Well,
so you just
that's
gotta
where it
follow
comes
their
down to
footsteps.
yes, and that's where it comes to Matthews and says, like, "Hey, if you're gonna speak like this or if these reports are gonna come out, like, you better be, popping 50 next year and, giving us the best chance to,
Yeah.
bring back something
Audition
for
for
you
us,
because."
Austin. We'll do an
Exactly,
audition
we're not
for
gonna
you, but,
trade you just
do it at the
because,
same
yeah, like,
time.
it's
I
gotta be a collaboration for sure,
Yeah, I think basically
and
my conclusion is I credit Austin for this. He has the loyalty and the self-awareness that he doesn't want to leave on bad terms.
I
I
believe that as
respect him a
well.
ton for
Yeah,
that. I think that he really cares. That I really do think his intentions throughout this entire era have been good. And like I said, I do feel they are a product of the culture. Um, and it wasn't. I don't know if it was that they were too emboldened as young guys. I don't even know. I can't even pinpoint it. But
well,
that's just how I
I would
feel
say that
about
I
it.
think that and obviously as someone from the outside, like, we don't know, but, like, I view it as, like, you're right, like, they were emboldened to be confident, but also I think to be themselves, whereas which is fine because 'cause we've seen, like, in certain ways it's helped them. Nylander,
Yeah.
obviously, it's helped his status in the city. It's helped
You're
him
saying maybe they
block
needed
out
some
the noise.
coaching for as like
But they
basically the
needed,
things that we're
yeah,
asking from them, the things we've always been
yes,
asking for them is some heart, some, some real acknowledging the fan aspect of it is something we've maybe
yeah,
criticized
yeah,
them for. And,
yeah,
the physicality aspect of it. Those are, I'd say, the
yeah,
three things. And this is the culture difference that we talk about between like, this is why I say like you drafted Gavin McKenna. Well, we're going to envision Gavin McKenna as a quote unquote Leaf. Whereas if the Boston Bruins draft Gavin McKenna, people have less question marks that he takes on what it means to be a Boston Bruin. Right.
yeah.
And I almost feel like with those guys, it's kind of too far. Like, can you teach Matthews and William Nylander that at 28 and 29, 30 years old? I think that maybe the boat has sailed. Like, I think that's a possibility. I would love to be shown wrong. Would love to. Be great.
Well, and that's so great that you brought up that point, because in these guys' formative years, the team tried to set them up with a coach that would give them all of those
Even the
qualities.
president.
Yes.
Even the GM, the president was a former, enforcer / Hall of Famer, all in, do it all in one. Stanley Cup winner. The GM was a guy of that era who won a Stanley Cup with the New Jersey Devils. The coach was a guy who won Stanley
Yes.
Cups. It didn't matter.
I think the problem was that, yeah, like everything that happened with Babcock, I think it also gave some of the younger players like a justification of like, oh, that not like that way is
Those
back.
guys will
But
have the
like,
heart and the passion and all
yeah,
that
and
stuff and
they
the
said like,
tenacity.
oh,
We're going to do our thing, and that's going to be taken care of.
and it didn't help that the very next voice that they brought into the locker room was a guy like Sheldon Keefe, who was like, "Oh gosh, let's go score! Like, let's just go up and down the ice. Let's go score. We'll figure it out.
We'll bring
like,
in Wayne Simmons and Jason Spezza and
Yes,
Joe Thornton and
yeah,
Matt
like you don't have
Martin,
to
and
deal
these
with
guys will be
that.
the toughness, and you don't have to learn it.
So for the next like 6 years, that's what they did, and then they saw relative success, to that level, and then once they hit that that obstacle, they bring in a Berube who's like, okay, I'm going to fill in the holes that this team doesn't have,
I think it's too
and
far gone now.
these guys went, wait, we don't have to do that because we've operated our whole time. We've got contracts. We're already set. Why that the Berube move? Not that they could have ever foreseen it, not that it was even an option, but like I do think that when it comes down to it, maybe Sheldon Keefe wasn't the right coach to bring these guys through their formative years, their learning NHL years, and then it's great that they had the success, but I think that also justified to them like we can do it this way.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. It's going to take a culture shock.
This is
which you
team A,
probably
team
can't
B
get.
talk as well, which
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
like this is part of it where it's like we could still be happy. Like, this is why I don't like that they're auditioning for Matthews. This is still being a team A, team B organization.
Yeah. And what do you need? You need a culture shock in a way that I don't know that you can have as with the group
and
still,
according to James Myrtle, there were candidates in the GM process that were eliminated,
of course,
because they didn't think that a retool was possible, because they said, no, if you hire me, we're going rebuild. Like this is done here. So this lends into, you need to retool, but I don't think any of us think it can work under team A, team B circumstances. So that's the delicate balance that these guys got to hit here. I've got like literally a 2-minute thing here that I've been on Puckpedia, Brando. We've been talking about, God, can they even do anything this summer? What the hell is this team going to look like? I just want to like put forth like kind of where they sit and what the most optimistic look to me looks like. And you can tell me if it's like so out of here that I should just go back to the drawing board, or it's like, God, you can actually see that happening. And I think that should give some Toronto fans some hope of like, okay, there's a world where, if they make the right signing, and this has one trade, and the trade isn't like, it doesn't even have like they have to get the specific player. It's just, this is a move that is going to happen, and I'll explain. So the Leafs are going to have, I think it's because I already made this roster here, so I don't have the number, but it's upwards of 20 million in cap space is what they're going to have going into July 1. It is a lot to work with. And to the point of like a weak free agency class, there's not really a guy other than I think Alex Tuch who's going to command potentially double digits. Like it's him and no one else. And then, we have obviously the breadcrumbs that Chayka has given us. Puck moving defenseman. honestly, even Darren Radish isn't a
Not a pure,
puck-moving
yeah.
defenseman. He's where you want the puck to end up on the power play. He's good defensively because Tampa's good defensively, but he's not going to skate the puck out of the zone. Like his metrics, if you look on like NHL Edge, whatever, he's an average to slightly above average skater, but he's not like, this is what people talk about with like Chase Reed and Keaton Verhoff. He's not a burner. He's not one of these new age kind of defensemen, but I think he kind of fills the hole best to what they need. No matter what, like you're going to need someone who can actually play PP1 and put the puck in the net. And Radish is kind of, it's him and Rasmus Anderson. Like the number 3 defenseman offensively. Yes, there's John Carlson, but I don't know how much he like fits your timeline. Is he's not going to be someone who revolutionizes things. Like the next UFA is Ryan Shea in Pittsburgh, who I think put up 30 points, and he screams me as a guy Dubas would try to keep because, yeah, he's an under the radar type of guy. Like you don't want under the radar stuff in Toronto. Like Matthews doesn't want that. You need actual stuff. With Darren Radish, like I have them signing him. Let's say it doesn't really matter the term because we just want to fit this under the cap for this year. I have him at 7.5. This is based off of 2 things. Puckpedia has an awesome tool where they aggregate all the signings made by like armchair GMs. So the average contract for a Darren Radish is, I think, 5 years at like 7.3. So I always put a premium on guys because I want to prove that it's actually realistic. I never undercut contracts. Yeah. Never. Yeah. So let's say 6 years, $7.5 million. I'd even go up to 8. It's really whatever. Okay. So, because the other thing too is they have 6 NHL defensemen. Like they're talking about needing to add puck moving. Yeah. Basically, your only option is sign one guy and make Simon Benoit a healthy scratch, which he was for a good portion of last year. Like outside of that, you're looking at the trade route, but I'm not about to pretend that I know what trade they would make there. So let's say you have Darren Radish, you have Gavin McKenna, whatever. Okay. Which is, they basically have 6 top 6 forwards already, right? Like that is a great spot to work with. You have Matthews, Nyes, Nylander, Tavares, Cowan, McKenna. Doesn't mean that they all have to play in the top 6, but those are top 6 quality
which
forwards.
One we don't want to play in the top 6, but they're going to have to. It's no question.
Cowan or McKenna, like
John Tavares.
I think they're gonna. I think he'll be there. I don't think they have.
He
a choice.
Will be there.
They don't have a choice because there is no centerman.
There is none. He is not a. But he cannot be described. I mean, he still had a great year.
Can he be your 2C on a line where he is the 2nd or 3rd best player? I guess we've seen him as the 2nd best player a ton.
No, I would say
he needs to be the 3rd
depending
best
on
player.
what your expectation is. Yes, but also if you're talking about contending for a Stanley Cup, no. I'm going to say
I will say there is no one in free agency that is going to like Charlie Coyle. Like does Charlie Coyle do it? No, right? Like he's like a tie, right? Like so.
No, I don't expect it in the top 6, but I don't think like league wide. I don't know that like he is now. He's still being talked about as a top 6 forward or a number 2 center. Like if people are having conversations about trading for John Tavares, which obviously like probably is not going to happen.
No,
they're not saying, "Hey, John Tavares, we need to trade for him to fill our second line center role." That's not the case, and the Leafs should do their best to try to avoid that. But I understand like it's not the biggest problem in the world if like he's still your number 2.
There are things I'm not holding my breath for, and this was like because I give the example of last year. Everyone was just like assuming like, oh, David Kampf, he's just not going to exist on the Leafs next year. And they, in a roundabout way,
basically didn't. Yeah, exactly. But
Calle Yarncroke, we thought was going to be poof gone. Was he poofed out of existence?
No.
Do not assume things with the team. No. The things you should not assume is that Morgan Riley is going to be traded. Do not assume that you will be disappointed. Do not assume Max Domi. Yeah, I also do. Do not assume Max Domi will be traded.
Not going anywhere.
Okay, like these are trades that you are asking other teams to do favors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
You should never expect that. That cannot be your base level expectation. So, okay. Do you think it's fair to expect the Leafs to sign one of Darren Radish or Rasmus Anderson on a deal, let's say from 7.5 to 8.5 million? Do you think I'm pie in the sky with that, or can you see that happening? I can see that happening. I think that's pretty
I can see it happen. I mean,
fair.
The Anderson one, I'm not as sure about. I don't know what he's making now.
I think he'll also fall. Like, I think he might be like more upwards. He might because he has more pedigree. The thing with Darren Radish is this is just the one season. I know that Sam McKee called him and Justin Bourne called him the defenseman Bobby McMahon. I think he's better than that. This is a guy who put up 70 points this year, 22 goals. His
The
playoff
worry with
record is
him
actually
more is
not the
that
greatest, but I think
I would
there's
be
something there.
I would be worried more that a team would overpay him, like, just, like, like, desperate to get a guy
Okay.
like that, and then just, like and ups the ante for another team. But, like, I don't
Yeah.
know the team out there that's willing to do that,
Okay.
but no, I think he is he should be the target because, yeah, like, you might end up hitting a home run if you get him for, like you said, like, a 5-year deal
Yeah.
on something as the cap continues to rise, like a 7.5, 8, even, like you said, $1,000,000, like, those contracts would be scary back in the day for a guy who's only shown 1 year of this type of production. But I think now, like, you have
This is
an
closer to
understanding that
5-6 million,
yeah,
right?
and it's not the end of the
Yeah.
world if it doesn't pan out exactly the way you think. But I think there's no doubt that he's still going to be a guy who can help you next year, like,
The other thing, like
in
the thing with
different
him
ways
too,
that you
is he
don't
has a
have.
very
Yeah,
defined role. Like what you'd want of him is
yeah, yeah,
Darren. You're going to play 20 minutes a night. He played
yeah,
more than 20 minutes every single game for Tampa.
yeah,
That
yeah.
is, influenced by not having Victor Hedman in the lineup.
No, but that helps
Um,
to see that he's capable of doing
sure.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. He only had 2 points. They were both on the power
yeah,
play, but that is where
yeah,
you would want him most,
yeah.
right? Like we've talked about the trigger man stuff for a decade. This entire tenure, Matthews era, he's never been a trigger man on the power play at the point.
No, no.
So I'm gonna assume I think that's an expectation that I have.
Yeah, that's
Boom.
fair.
Center, like you said, I'm not assuming that they can usurp John Tavares. I don't have them like signing Charlie Coyle. I think they
That's
could
fine.
like I think there's two forwards, one specifically out of Columbus that I'm looking at, and they're not Charlie Coyle, that I think make a lot of sense. One of them I think makes a lot more sense. That being Mason Marchment. We know that they tried to trade from last year. This is obviously a different regime now, but I think back to Arizona and Chayka with Lawson Krause. And to me, this is that type of guy. And he's a guy who was awesome in Columbus. They probably want to resign him. If they don't, I think he fits that role perfectly. He ended up having a great season. I think it was like 30 points in 45 games in
Yeah,
Columbus. He wasn't great in Seattle. Um, he's exactly who you'd be wanting to like in your top six if you want to bump out a Cowan or McKenna. I think his deal. This is once again I look at the puck beat stuff. There's also AFP Analytics, which does contract projections every year. Love their stuff. They have him at 5.5. Would you pay 5.5 times 5 for Mason Marchment? He's 31 years old. Like it's these are free agent contracts. They're rich. They're
yeah.
rich. They are.
I I mean, yeah. It's not even so much about the money, more so the term with a guy like that. At his
Sure.
age, I don't know what I'm getting year to year, I think, like, would he be a disappointment? No, probably not. Like, I think you like you said, in this type of market, I think that's a very fair contract, and I think that's something that they will definitely look at. It's
I
just
also just I lean free agency because if you're trying to improve a team without assets, you know where you do
all
that? Like
that.
it's free agency. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to pay assets, right? Like
No,
now,
100%, like,
Czech
it's
has talked about getting creative. Like that is definitely, we expect some trades. The only trade that I have written in stone, and this isn't a specific name, but like they have to trade a goalie. Like it is like it's just that they have to roster construction wise. They have three guys. Hildeby cannot go through waivers. They
yeah,
have to make a decision on one of Stolar's, Waller, Hildeby. I don't know which one is the trade because once again, I think Stolar's, you're asking a team to do a favor. So do I expect that? That's like too pie in the sky for me. I think they're going to keep Stolar's if I'm going to guess today, if I'm playing hypothetical talk, right? Would you trade one of Waller, Hildeby? Sounds like a way to get a puck moving defenseman, maybe. Like this is how you get creative. Like this is how you kind of
yeah.
if you
Well,
like. I think this is what they're
I
going to
don't
try
think
and do.
I don't think Hildeby fetches you enough of
When I
assets to do that, and knowing that he could still be the guy to fill in for the
yeah,
other one that I think
but
for me, like
you also have Akimov, who is the same age
yes,
as
that's fair, yeah,
Hildeby,
that's fair.
right?
Yeah,
Because this is the thing as well. Akimov, I don't think needs waivers next year, but you have four guys that you saw at the NHL level last year who
yeah,
showed you something, whether that's in a previous year in Stolar's or while Hildeby and Akimov all showed something last year. Like, if
yeah,
you want to talk about creativity, if you want to talk about having like a plethora of something, I think that's where you look. And when I say they get a puck moving defenseman, I'm not saying like they're going to get like some franchise altering guy. I'll give an example here. Ottawa feels awesome about trading, I think, either 1 or 2 third-round picks for Jordan Spence. Under the radar move for a young defenseman who, for whatever reason, confusingly fell out of favor in LA and was a difference maker for Ottawa. Now, they get swept in the first round. That happens, right? Like that doesn't win them the cup. But like that's the type of move. I'm not saying Hildeby's fetching you. Like I think Hildeby's value, and I looked, there isn't really good examples in recent history of like goalie trades. There's not a lot. Especially not like a guy like kind of at this age. Like you go back to like Freddie when we acquired him for a first round pick. I don't think Hildeby's like he doesn't have that resume. Freddie was a playoff goaltender. Like there was a lot there. I think with Hildeby, if you're expecting maybe 2 third-round picks worth of value, I think that's where he's at. I think he's one of the better NHL-ready goalies of his age. Like he's 25. He can step in, I'd say, in a 1A, 1B role with someone on a team. I don't have an example yet for a team like, Edmonton would want, sure, like whatever, but I can't give you what the match is. You have to find a match between, who knows one I can think of, but once again, like this has complications. You know who needs a goalie really, really bad? Because I think they legitimately have no NHL goalies next year. Florida. They have no goalie.
Yeah, Bobrovsky obviously as a free agent.
Yeah. Like, can you get a Mackie Samoskevich for like a Hildeby? Like, I'm asking for a guy who plays on a third line. He's like, I think 23 or 24. Like maybe that's on the higher end of a return expectation, but like that type of player for a team that has a need, they have to trade a goalie. And I think because we have Akimov and Hildeby, I don't think trading Wall is the move for a team that's trying to contend. And I don't think I should expect a Stolarz trade because that's too pie in the sky. I'm left with Hildeby. So I think that's the type of move. Like Samoskevich isn't a puck moving defenseman; he's a forward. But like I'm trying to give you a value estimate. I think that like they have to move a goalie, and so I'm gonna guess it's Hildeby.
Yeah, and that's not creative. That's not about it. And I'm sure that's what I'm trying. I'm honestly if I'm giving you my scenario in terms of what I would do, maybe I think I would. It's difficult. The Stolarz thing, it almost puts him out of the running because of his injury history.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. He says he's going to be healthy for day one, though, too, right? Which is like, that doesn't matter to teams. Like, no team is going to be like, Stoli said that, we'll trade for him. But, like, for your sake, you're like, okay, God, maybe there's a chance we actually have this guy healthy for once next year.
But I do wonder, the thing about Stolarz is like, and again, we'll never know this, but if a team is willing to take a flyer on him, if you can get, and I think with him, you're looking more, I'm not saying necessarily like
I think there's a better chance you have to attach a draft pick than you're receiving one.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I don't think that he's really in the running right now. Joseph Woll, though, if you can get a team to believe that he could be a number, like that he could,
I think teams would believe. I believe that.
Yes. Right? Yes. But it's the same thing. Teams might believe that the talent's there, but do they like? Does a team think that if you're trading for Joseph Woll, you're getting a 50 game start? Like, no, I don't know that teams really believe
the situation has to be a team that already has one goalie who they think can take up 40 games, right? Like that's kind of.
But I think that if
situation dependent, but I think his value has to be a first round pick, right? Like that's.
And I think that if that's the case, or a player that you think can help you this year as well,
equivalent to first round value.
I think you got it. I think you do that. You try to get Stolarz back on the mend. You try to get him as many games healthy as possible.
And have the two young guys in the
Hildeby's there if you need a spot starter or obviously the backup. Akimov's there as your emergency third. And then if everything goes well in that scenario, then you look to move Stolarz next summer. You get more assets for him. Bang, bang. You have 2 goalies that can step in and continue to grow.
Oh, so you're saying look at trading Wall this year potentially, and then rebuilding Stolarz's value, and then also cashing in.
Trade him next year.
So that sounds great.
It probably doesn't. It never is going to go the way you think.
Yeah,
which
like
is
that's
the risk.
like a little too pie in the sky.
But I wouldn't necessarily trade one of the younger guys. Look at last year; they needed both of them. Like you could be in a situation this year again where it's
because the other thing is too is you have 2 injured goalies and 2 guys who didn't get injured. So
you have
And
guys
listen,
that
I
can
can I
fill
can
it,
be
but like,
convinced that you trade Wall because Wall gets you the better return as well.
yeah,
Like he
yeah,
gets you the best return of the
yeah.
options. Like I can be
And,
convinced on that.
and if you went into the year with Stolars as your number one and Hill to be ready as a
Hildeby
one
and
A
Axiomov in
and
the Hildeby
Akimov ready to
role.
step in, like
I don't
I
hate
don't
that.
hate that, and I do
It's
think
also
that
the
that
most
gives
cap
you
effective.
absolutely, and it resets. I don't think Chayka is a guy, knowing him, his business background, everything like that. I don't think he's a guy who's going to be like, oh, I got all this money tied up in the goalies, like who aren't barely playing like 80 games, together. Like,
He did acquire a goalie in Arizona. This is obviously a different time in the NHL landscape where goalies
yeah,
had
yeah,
so much more of an effect, and it was for anti-rant. Like he traded
right.
7
That's right. That was a
for
terrible
Stepan
trade,
and
wasn't it? Yeah,
anti-ranta.
yeah,
So,
like
you
brutal. But
know,
like, I
yeah.
don't know what they were trying to accomplish at the time. I'm trying to remember where in their like, because I know when he
They were
first got there,
trying like this is in the
they
lead
were
up to
sort of
them.
coming off of like a like
They were trying to get to like a competitive standpoint, which is,
yeah,
they
yeah,
then get Kessel, they get Taylor
yeah.
Hall, Stepan was there as well. Like, yeah. But
But it's a whole like, I think if they're trying to, move off of a goalie, like,
yeah.
I can't imagine thinking that, like, it's a sound hockey decision to be like, "Yeah, let's get rid of the guys that are gonna
Fine.
be
Yeah.
stepping in eventually." Like,
No,
I don't
I think
know,
you've
like,
convinced me that's an option too.
yeah,
Like I'm
I don't
fine to roll with the young guys, honestly. Like you said, I think goaltending has been so much of a crapshoot. Take the guys who are on their entry level deals, and
yeah. And if you feel good about but, it all depends on, like you said, like, you gotta almost float all of them out there and be like, "What can we get for
sure,
any of these
that's
guys?"
what you should do.
Because
Yeah,
you
yeah,
probably right now are in the position where you feel like that's your one position of positivity, I guess, or like
yeah,
you don't need anything there. So why not try to recoup something there and help yourself amongst the rest of the group?
yeah.
And then
The
knowing that
other
you're
Stoli
going to
trade I
be
can think
okay.
of as well is like if you're just doing bad contract for bad contract, that doesn't necessarily make you better, right? Like I can
Right,
think of
right.
like Stolars for like and this isn't a team that needs a goalie, so it doesn't make sense. But like Frank Vetrano has fallen out of favor in Anaheim after a couple good years. He makes like 4 mil, which
Right.
is similar to Stolar's. You swap your problems and see if they solve themselves
Yeah.
in new situations. That's a bad example because, like I said, Anaheim doesn't need Stolars, but like
Right,
you
right.
find that type of team that needs that match. And because to me, getting creative, I brought up the example of Seth Jones, and I'll promise this is the last thing I got. Brando will get on with our lives
Oh,
here,
no,
but the
good for you.
Seth Jones example that I always talk about. Who the hell thought that that was a slam dunk awesome trade by Florida last year? Seth Jones's perception was in the dumpster. He went to Chicago, signed for 9 million, and proceeded to suck. And that's not just perception; that's stats. Like that's what the numbers would tell you. Florida takes a huge swing, right? They trade a first, they trade Spencer Knight, they get Seth Jones. They're betting on A, they're a good team so that, he doesn't have to do as much. And B, we're a good team. This is going to motivate a guy. This guy's been playing in Chicago where it's been awful for the
Terrible.
past
Yeah.
5 years, right? And all of a sudden, Seth Jones looks like the Columbus Seth Jones. You have to try and do that with players, right? The problem is it's Toronto still. Like you have to be a good team. Like that's what you got to sell like yourself on. That's
Yeah.
how the trade makes sense. You don't acquire crap contracts that you think can be good contracts unless you think you're good. It's a risk and a half. But you want to talk about creativity? You want to talk about a team that's been so risk averse under Brad Treliving, and it's sometimes in the Dubas era because of the upper echelon executives and the board, and like not being able to have full autonomy. We're seeing that in Pittsburgh right now. He's been wheeling and dealing. Chinikov trade, for example, right?
Yeah.
This is how you get creative and make something risky happen. So
Well, and I think for the most part, like people understand that the team is in a position where, for the most part, almost any change would be welcome as good change. Like you can't, without stepping on
hmm
the ice first.
hmm
Like you're not gonna kill the team if a trade
what do you
if they
mean you traded
exactly if they do
Brandon
something that
Carlo?
that
Yeah,
that can't really be determined
yeah,
until we see them get out there. So I mean, like it's just want to see them take some swings. And Chayka, to his credit, seems to he believes that he's a guy that will do that, and we've seen in the
24
past that he's
trades in 4
very
years.
active.
Yeah,
So I mean, it, now that he has like more of a an organization to work with and to be to be supported by.
Doesn't have to worry about the accountant checking the extra dollar on the end of a guy's contract because they might not be able to pay the lease at the arena next year, right? Like, yeah, he doesn't have to worry about
And we
that.
know that he didn't necessarily like with the whole Doan situation. Like, I don't know that he was leaning on too many other people. He was just kind of maybe flying by the seat of his pants, making some of these decisions. But
Yeah, or the people he
this
surrounded
time
himself
around,
with weren't the best guys, right? He's
yeah,
got to
like
make smarter decisions on that now.
he'll have learned, and I would if Sundin is as involved as we might think, like he'll have his opinions too. And I think you combine that with the group that they've got in place, if they keep some of those people around, like there's enough there where I think he will be able to make better, smarter decisions going forward. And then, from there it'll come down to like what's available and what other teams will allow them to do if they're talking trades. Like it's not exactly like teams are not going to be lining up to make like you said friendly
Yeah,
deals with Chayka, but also with the Maple Leafs. Like
yeah.
we just haven't seen it. So yeah,
Well, Brando, I'm out of breath. I got
it's
like
fun.
a sore throat now, dude. But God, I think we covered enough Leafs for like the next. I don't know if we're gonna be talking Leafs again until middle of June, brother. But
Oh
God,
man,
we got through it all there. If you weren't here for Leaf content, you're a psychopath. Like in terms of I don't know why you listen to this in full. Justin and Manda will be back. We'll be talking about everything else in the world of sports. It'll be great. It'll be fun. And yeah, you won't have to listen to anything Toronto Maple Leaf related for I don't know, maybe they surprise us. Maybe they go and do something tomorrow. But
yeah, let's
we
hope.
covered
Yeah, like
a lot there, brother. And any parting words for us?
no, I mean it was fun. It was great to kind of just let it all loose. I feel like there's been so
Yeah.
much lately that like everyone has just a million thoughts they want to get out, and I think this is a great platform to do it. And yeah, just excited to take a little bit of a break off the Leafs content, but see what they decide to do, in the coming months. So it'll be great. I'm sure we'll be having some of these, preemptive conversations going forward too. So
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, out of thoughts, like you said. I am out of thoughts. We are out of time. Thanks so much for listening. Subscribe, like, I don't know what the other guys usually mention as hosts. I usually don't host, but thanks so much for watching. We will see you, probably more of us, next time we talk. Take it easy until then.